At least, Brandon thought so. Maybe Ashura really just was ignoring him, and simply blissful in Ned's lap. Brandon now regretted not having this talk with Ned just one-on-one. He could not say a word in his defense as Ned's accusations kept him silent. But finally, something like anger was creeping into Ned's tone. And where do you all get the notion that Robert is going to dress Lionel up like a doll, lock her up in the tower at Storm's End and leave her to play with her hair and embroider on her babe's napkins? Do you think Bobby fell in love with a pretty picture? He beds the best whores in Gulltown. Robert fell in love with the idea of a companion as wild and as willful as our sister. Hells, Robert will train her properly in the yard himself. I know that he will because I fucking dictated that part of the betrothal agreement. And Robert can scarce believe his luck, still. Robert may not keep to Lia's bed, that is true. And yes, she will have to bear him children. But then she always was going to bear children for someone, and nary a husband would indulge Lia's less proper whims the way Robert is going to. And who is to say Robert is actually going to stray from Lia's bed? Did you stray, Brandon, when you were with Barbary? It took Brandon a second to grasp that his brother actually expected him to answer. No, I did not. It was supposed to sound defiant as Brandon said the words, but it only came out hollow. Ned's short laugh in response was cruel, and the question that followed was asked cruelly. What did you do together that she kept you true? Everything, Brandon whispered, we did everything together. We rode the rills, hunted in the wolf's wood, sailed the spear and fucked like rabbits. Brandon did not enjoy this talk nearly as little as he had expected. Still, brash talking and coarse language just might get Ned to retreat. A little. It did not. Figures. Ned must have been used to way worse from Robert, and Ned could probably even pick up those mannerisms when it suited him. It showed. So, Barbary enjoyed it when you two fucked like rabbits. Brandon did not have a habit of sputtering, but still some undignified sounds escaped him together with a mouthful of wine as he looked at his brother. Looked at Ashura, wiggling on Ned's lap. Looked back at Ned. What? Wait. What? Brandon croaked out, the wine still burning in his throat. A simple question, Brandon. Very simple. Did Barbary enjoy it when you two fucked like rabbits? Ned kept his eyes on Brandon as he talked still, but at the same time he started stroking Ashura more strongly. Boldly. She tried to turn on his lap again, but Ned held her firm, and soon Ashura started grinding him, instead. Brandon could see Ned was keeping a tight grip on Ashura's breast beneath the coat, kneading her teat roughly. The other hand's movements sped up, stroking more strongly. Ashura. Ned had turned to purr into Ashura's ear, drawing a whimper from her lips. Ned's voice was tender, yet strong. Loving, yet forceful. Controlled, yet hungry. Tell me what you want me to do to you, my love. Tell me where you want me to do it. Tell me how you want me to do it. Ashura's eyes had closed as she backed up into Ned, a content smile on her lips. Noises between gasps and sighs escaped her. Ned had to stop his hands, before she could answer. I want you, Ned. All of you. You are mine. Do you hear me, Ned? You are mine. It started as a whisper, but Ashura's last words were a scream. She had opened her eyes, blazing purple, and her gaze had kept Ned's a prisoner as she looked at him. Brandon had never seen his brother look so possessive, and Ashura did not lose to Ned in that sentiment in the slightest. You are mine, Ashura Stark. Ned growled the words, with an intensity kindred to wildfire. Like an oath. Brandon shivered, but he could not look away. Even as none of the two seemed to pay him any mind at all, anymore. I want our whole group to return north at the pace my wheelhouse will set, Ned, because you are to fuck me so thoroughly, even the thought of riding a horse will have me in pain. Ned bit her shoulder, and Ashura looked like she spasmed for a second, her head jerking aimlessly and her eyes wild. The cloak shifted, and Ned was obviously rubbing Ashura hard, leaving her panting and breathless. I want your tongue to map every inch of my body and your cock to leave me screaming your name in ecstasy, until my throat is too raw to even whisper the word enough. Ashura's hips bucked faster and harder by the second, and if not for Ned's tight embrace, the cloak covering her would have long been tossed to the floor. Her mouth opened impossibly wide, as if to howl to the gods, but only deafening silence came out. She relaxed a second after, apparently coming down from a high, as her whole skin seemed to start glistening. Ned wrung a kiss from her mouth and got a tongue sucking for his throat before they released another again. I want you to feast on me until you drown in my juices, and after I will ride you so hard that you will not have the strength to even rise from your bed until 3 nights have passed. I will. Whatever Ashura was going to say, she could not. A scream, almost a wail, ripped itself from her throat as she collapsed in Ned's embrace, panting and gasping and shivering. She did not move, at least not consciously. Tremors still ran through Ashura's body, and Ned was drunk on her sight. Ashura Dane, the most beautiful woman in the realm, had convulsed and collapsed in his brother's arms right in front of him, and Brandon had never in his life felt as uncomfortable. But he had been unable to avert his eyes before it had ended. The only sound that could be heard was the shallow breath of a woman in blissful oblivion. Ned was gentle now with his strokes, but he never stopped. Ashura opened her eyes then. She did not even spare Brandon a glance, her gaze fire and passion as she turned and gave Ned a long, tender kiss, more a slight brushing of lips. After she had released his eyes, she kept hold of his eyes. Mine. Ashura said it once more, but this time it was just a whisper. For all that, it was not any less possessive or intense. Mine. Ned returned just the same. For the first time since Brandon had entered, Ashura truly looked at him, and Brandon almost flinched at the bottomless hate and the pure contempt in her eyes. Get rid of the vermin and come to bed, Ned. The way Ashura said it, Brandon knew she meant every word. And yet, for the first time Brandon thought he saw something akin to a flicker of pain in Ned's face. Nonetheless, as Ashura rose, Ned's cape wound tight around her body. Ned rose not a second after and opened the door as Ashura sat herself on the bed. Brandon knew when he was dismissed. Wait a second, my love. I have not finished my important talk with my brother. Brandon had not thought Ned to follow him out of his room with a short word to Ashura, yet he did. And as Ned looked at him once more, Brandon felt like a doe facing the huntsman. So, Brandon. Brother. You never answered. Did Barbary enjoy it when you two fucked like rabbits? Once more Brandon was stuck silent. He could hear Ashura's almost petulant mewling for a second as Ned closed the door behind him, but Brandon had his own troubles connecting what he had seen to, well, anything actually. Ned did not seem inclined to wait for Brandon to recover his bearings before he spoke on. Brandon almost had the faint impression his brother was enjoying this. When you fucked Barbary up her cunt, Brandon, did she enjoy it? Did she ride you to oblivion because you enjoyed each other, or did she lie in bed like a dead fish, waiting for you to finish? Is there a point to this? Brandon did not really enjoy this conversation. He was not shy about talking of his exploits, but the way Ned kept pushing the issue was discomforting. So, Brandon's answer only came out through gritted teeth. Yes, Barbary did enjoy my cock up her cunt. From the back. From the front. On top of me. Under me. She liked to explore, Eddard. I have not had a woman who I enjoyed sex with as much as with Barbary. Does that answer your fucking question? It was galling to see that Brandon's little brother was simply unconcerned at that answer, almost showing Brandon complete disregard. The familiar fire started within Brandon then, beckoning. Blooming. It would be so easy, so satisfying to just lean into it. Ride it. Rage. But, unconcerned, Ned simply talked. You know, Ashura likes riding. Horses, I mean in this case. Hawking as well. Dancing. Oh, how we love to dance. Not just dainty steps like a demure lady that is afraid her sweating will ruin her face paint. No, Ashura loves dancing to exhaustion with me. There was almost a wistful shine to Ned's face as he spoke, and Brandon knew his brother was far away right now. That did not lessen the fire coursing through Brandon's veins. But Ned also seemed earnest and not hostile to Brandon for the first time since Brandon had entered that room. The reason I am telling you this, Brandon, is the same reason why I believe Robert is the right man for our sister. Eddard did not even seem to notice Brandon's wolf's blood boiling. Or he did, and he simply did not care. Would it matter? Did Ned ever feel it himself, the rage, hungry and wild? Ned's words, though. They gave Brandon pause. So, Brandon did not storm off, he did not rage. He remained. He listened. And just a little, Brandon understood as Ned talked on. Leia thinks she needs a man devoted to her, true, knightly, shining. That is stupid. Leia has been given a huge birth of freedom by father for the daughter of a Lord Paramount, north or elsewhere. Robert would let her keep that freedom. He would encourage her to be even wilder. Leia wants another Eamon the Dragon Knight. What she needs, though, is her own rogue Prince Demon. And suddenly, Brandon did not know anymore. Despite himself, Brandon found that he agreed with what Ned had said. However, Brandon really had not needed to hear the next thing Ned said as well. True as it might probably be. And trust me, Brandon, Leia craves the freedom we have. That includes to enjoy fucking like we do, despite being a lady. Because it is fun. Because it is exciting. Because it is liberating. Leia will ride Robert through the 7 kingdoms once she has gotten a taste for the dastardly deed, mark my words. And what our spirited little sister brings to the bedroom might just keep Robert bound to only her. Like Barbary did you. There was an evil smirk to Ned's words at that, but it was the kind of evil smile friends gifted another along with a playful insult. Gods, that image. Their little sister. Was there nothing Ned held holy? Still, Brandon felt the self-same evil smile splitting his face. Ned spoke truth. Painful truth, maybe, but truth. Brandon had heard much of that kind of truth, recently. Still. Brandon finally felt like brothers, just for a second. Then, the door behind them was ripped open. In a flash, Ashura had grabbed Ned, pulled him back inside the room, and then slammed the door shut again. Well. There was no way Brandon could miss that hint. Also, Brandon knew neither how well the inn kept the noise isolated to the respective rooms, or how loud Ned and Ashura were going to get tonight. Turning, Brandon hightailed out of the entire inn. Maybe it would be reasonable to sleep in a tent still today. Notes. I regret nothing. Except that I need to improve my smut writing capabilities. It's hard, horrible pun intended. In terms of plot tie-in, I am reasonably satisfied. Still, comments are welcome. And if it wasn't obvious, the fic is not dead. However, updates will be sporadic, though I have the next dual chapter all mapped out. Yes, dual chapter, as in I have a notion of a plan what's coming. Winter. Sorry, couldn't help myself. For all seriousness, time to prep the Jenga tower for the big collapse. Edit. This scene has received a more thorough makeover, I'd say. First, my smut writing abilities have improved. For this, I thank mostly the Ultimate Guide to Writing Smut Fic by Quinn Anderson here on AO3, https://archiveophone.org/works/955716 right parenthesis. The updated smut is not good, I'd say, but better. For example, the word ministrations has been permanently banned. Also, in case you are confused by older comments, while the semi-voyeuristic smut scene remained, its setup has been greatly changed. Aside from all that, I still welcome comments aplenty. So long, #Ricardinarole, in the hay. Chapter 14, A Woman's Life is Mess and Magic. Notes. Title quote. A woman's life is 9 parts mess to 1 part magic, you'll learn that soon enough, and the parts that look like magic often turn out to be messiest of all. Cersei Lannister, A Clash of Kings. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. The sex, as ever, was pure bliss. Still Ashura marveled at that. But right then, right there, in Ned's arms and gloriously saw, she felt like ever after. Safe and loved. Right. Lucky dream on a falling star. And her thoughts returned once more to the unthinkable, before she squashed them. It happened less every time. That those two could be brothers still baffled her. That there could even be a man like Ned, for once, made for just her. And then, the monster that was his brother. She did not like to think of him. She did not like to see him. She did not like him, though that was an understatement. Unbidden, the thoughts came once more and she nestled back into the warm and safe embrace. As always, her soulmate seemed to know what was on her mind and pulled her tighter. I'm here with you. He's not worthy of your fear. Today is a good day, Shura. You are to be my wife. A soft kiss, a soothing nip on the back of her neck. The words needn't be said, but a comfort they were nonetheless. Wife. Husband. Lady Stark. It felt so right, now. Oh, how she loved him. At Harrenhal, ill-fated as it was then. The letters after, picking up her pieces. Seeing him on the docks, and not a day they spent apart after. She thought back again to the first time they found themselves in bed with each other. Neither seduced the other, it somehow just happened. Mysteriously. Magical. Wonderful. They'd both been clumsy, then, but so tender. They'd talked after. Of it. The only time. That tent. His brother's invitation, and she'd been so trusting of Brandon then. How not, the brother she'd fallen for was just all for her. How could his family not be? She'd even liked Brandon back then, he'd been their catalyst after all. And, objectively, beautiful. Not like Ned, though both Starks were a vision. One, lithe and lean, strong and broad of back, and somehow graceful. The other was taller, broader in his shoulders but not compared to the rest of his body. Pure muscle. Brandon's betrothed, well, Brandon's betrothed back then at least, as well as many other ladies at Harren's Hall did obviously favor the heir. It also helped that Brandon was more boisterous than Ned. And, well, the heir. Back then. Oh, how sweet that thought still tasted. Ned had been at the training yard with Robert, then. Brandon had strung lie after lie, and among friends the ale flew. Among friends. Until they weren't. Until all was hazy, as Ashura's dream shattered. As it turned into a nightmare, the brother of her love turning and pawing and grasping and pawing and holding and ripping and... She'd run. Run, run as that infernal song rang in her ear, as her bliss turned poison. Until it just wasn't. She did not even see Ned that day. She did not open his letter until the day after, when he'd already left. Though all spoke of Lyanna Stark's crowning, the northern host at least must have been rampant with rumor about Ashura. She'd dreaded Ned's letter. That all had been a lie. That Ned was just another man, seeing her like they all did. She'd almost burned the letter unopened, if not for Elia. It had been the balm that Ashura did not know could even exist. She'd cried, happy and cathartic. For days. She could not even bear the touch of most men, then, only Abby and Art. And the touch of Ned's words, arriving every few days by Raven. 7. Ned put more words to paper in their relationship than he took into his mouth. Ashura still kept her favorite letters with her. And then they met again. The reunion on the docks was sweet, but the stay at the Eyrie was magical. Just them, above the world. Lord Arryn had been courteous, though some ladies at court were openly disdainful. Surprisingly, Robert had been a friend, despite his reputation. Robert was probably even one of the happiest at the Eyrie to have Ashura with them. Finally the other ladies around had visual proof that Ned was taken. Robert's flirtatious ways had made Ashura uncomfortable at first, even as he solemnly kept to horse for bedmates. Some of Robert's traits had seemed too much like Brandon's. They'd become friends one day when Ned took Ashura with them to visit Mirestone. Despite Robert's affection, Robert's friendship for Ned, Ashura had not expected Robert to be a loving father. His daughter Maya was a delight, and another stony person around was soothing, somehow. She'd known then that Robert was not a beast like Brandon. She could never imagine Brandon the way Robert was with Maya. As stony Dornish herself, though bastardy and wedlock were seen as a bigger taint than for her sandy and salty compatriots, natural children were not nearly as reviled to Ashura as north of the marches. And then, she did grow up under Maria in the water gardens from her 12th name day along Elia and Oberyn. If you could say that Oberyn ever grew up, that is. He'd probably make great friends with Robert, though. Ned's rustling pulled her back to their room as he made to stand. They had excused themselves from Ricard's, from father's company earlier to celebrate. And they did, until the savage had come. Brandon had become a lesser demon now. Ashura had not feared him since a good half-year after the incident. She had been afraid it would bubble up when they faced each other at Daeari, but a letter from Elia had her hopeful. And then her new father had threatened to slap Brandon like a bitch for even just bothering Ashura. She'd loved Ricard Stark a little, then, and more for his words, and every day she heard Brandon's confession at dusk before their whole company. Oh, how sweet that tune had turned, honey on Ashura's soul. The men had taken it up already, and while some still looked at Ashura lustfully, more were respectful and deferent towards her. Ashura would get the whole North to love her, and all of Westeros to sing to her happiness. Dawn, for sure, would. Brandon had still looked at her with a glimmer of that lust he'd had when they met again, though subdued now. He'd been reduced to a more familiar, more pathetic monster than Ashura had remembered Brandon Stark as on bad days. Not worthy of her fear. Not worthy of her attention. Not worthy, even, of her barest acknowledgement to his presence. Ashura had had to deal with lust. Always, ever present around her. It had been her shield and her companion since she was 3 and 10. It was a familiar shield. A familiar weapon. Turning cravens onto themselves and leaving beasts leashed or ravenous. They were not special. Brandon was not special. It had been time to reconquer her weapon against the shadowy vestige of her nightmare again, earlier. And her arsenal had only grown with Ned on her side. Lady Stark. Ethan had been the first to call her that, not 3 days after they'd met at Dare. Ashura suspected that it had happened at Lord Stark's directive, for everything seemed to happen for that cause. It had caught on quickly, and Rhaenys had started sleeping in her foster father's tent the day after. Yes, Ashura's Dornish reputation was a weapon. They danced through the night, both entranced. The day after, the song was on everyone's lips. And now, it had come true. Lady Stark. Her future husband was putting his breeches on, but oh how Ned's chiseled abs glistened. Ripples on the flesh, whispers of promise. Sore, and happy for it, that Ashura felt as she stretched herself a little on the bed. The fog was on fire in Ned's eyes, and her Ned did not have his mind on his doublet as he tried to tie it. Ashura rose, too, to tie Ned's coat for him. Ned's hands stilled immediately as she stepped up to him, his eyes hungry. As Ashura took care of the strings, Ned's hands grasped her face, and after each knot she was rewarded with a deep, lingering kiss, burning and melting. Gods, she had half a mind to undress Ned instead of the other right then. After Ashura finished lacing Ned up, she turned for her own dress, taking a seat on the couch to more comfortably complete the complicate bindings. Ned sat down behind her, reeving her raven tresses down before taking out her ivory comb he'd taken possession of. Like each morning, before they joined, he took care of her, complicated knots or beautifully elaborate hairdos, then changing it up with wonderfully simple northern styles. Ned had once told Ashura how he'd taken care of his sister that way in the aftermath of their mother's death. The memories he'd told her of Lady Lyra were all so familial, so precious. She could almost picture it, Ned's mother singing songs to him and his sister while she braided her daughter's hair. The picture even left Ashura yearning a little. Today, though, Ned seemed to want to leave Ashura's hair unbraided. Ashura was surprised when Ned took out a small pitcher and started softening her locks with olive oil. Where had he gotten that? The olives smelled of home. Ashura loved Ned's hands. Leaning back, minutes passed them in content silence. Ashura was most reluctant when Ned got slower and slower in weaving her hair, before stopping to kiss the top of her head. But as Ned turned Ashura around and started kissing almost all parts of her face, it wasn't too bad, either. She did not know what the catalyst was. It wasn't anything fun, for their laughter was one of pure happiness. No words were needed as Ned and Ashura rose, almost in unison. She just felt, in these moments, that they were complete. They kept with each other today. They had discussed yesterday what they would do. First they made for Lord Arryn's quarters, who readily let them in. Elbert and Kyle were both standing in front of Lord John's desk, and all three of them were poring over a map of the eastern riverlands. The talk seemed to be on economics, Runestone's trade capacity through Gulltown and by road being the focus. The conversation stopped as Ned cleared his throat. Kyle, Elbert. John. Allow me to reintroduce my future wife, Lady Ashura, Ned said, his tone quiet as ever but laden with emotion. Gods, her future husband and his penchant for the power of words. Her future husband. There was silence for a second, before John was the first to step closer and envelop his foster son in a tight hug. The old man did not need to say a word as Ned returned the gesture. When they released each other and the elder lord turned towards her, Ashura almost believed to see a slight shimmer to his eyes. "I am beyond words and know you two will find happiness together, Lady Ashura, you and my son." Ashura had never expected to gain two new fathers through a single marriage, but she could not be happier. She felt the moisture in her eyes, then, too, and saw it reflected in Ned's eyes. Elbert congratulated Ned in silence as Kyle came to her first. "And now the maid'll be the quiet wolf's wife." Gods. Kyle stepped away humming after a kiss to the back of Ashura's hand and a whispered Lady Stark, a smile playing on his lips. Afterwards Ashura did not even hear Elbert's congratulation properly, though he must have spotted the happiness in her eyes as he stepped away. "There is no question, then, that Lord Dane will consent to the match?" John asked. Ned looked at her in askance. He did not doubt the answer, he only kept quiet for her to speak. Gods, how she loved him in these moments. She'd only ever stand at his side. At his side, she'd only ever stand. There was even a trace of mirth to Ned's quiet smile as Ashura spoke to his foster father. "When I entered the capital as my princess lady-in-waiting, my lord father transferred to her the right to arrange a suitable marriage for me in his name as long as it proved fruitful for Starfall's trade. Sunspear might even offer to add to the dowry the usage of its own ports so as to not lose control of the timber market in Dawn entirely." Ashura turned to Kyle after a second, the lay of the veil in her mind. She tried to keep her voice innocent, though a small chuckle by both Ned and John belied her. "Tell me, Sir Kyle, do you not think Runestone might serve a faster relay point than Gulltown for some ships of that increased ship traffic to stop on their way from White Harbor to Sunspear? The ships could circumvent the Bay of Crabs entirely in that case." At her words Ashura could see the wheels turning in Kyle's eyes. He was just a distant cousin of the main Royce branch, but it was not difficult to contemplate. Ashura knew of the fondness between Ned and Bronze Yone as well. It was well known in the Vale. Still, Kyle did not have the necessary authority to make decision in the Royce's name. So, he only promised to bring the matter to his lord cousin's attention as quickly as possible. Ashura and Ned left the Three Valumen, after. Ashura liked to believe they continued talking on the economics of Runestone. The word of increased trade alone would benefit them in the lordly circles soon. They made their rounds together through camp. Speaking of the confirmed betrothal, painting pictures of a wedding in Winterfell, dreaming of children. Not loudly, but loud enough. The guards picked up on it, of course they did. Lady Stark. A promise fulfilled. Maybe Ethan Glover would receive a station at Winterfell come time. The Tumblestone was where they ended up. Ricard knew, but left them to their devices. For half an hour they were alone, talking up the future amongst themselves, not as a way to spread information, just them. However, not long after came an old woman to the river, ancient even. There was an indignity to leaving a woman of her age to wander here by herself. She did not look comfortable in her bones. At Ashura's urging Ned did notice her as well. He'd not noticed before, attention all on her. Together they approached her, and Ancient did not begin to describe her. Roomy eyes almost overgrown. Not a single tooth left in her mouth. Warts, thick and swarthy, marred her aged face. Was green a skin tone one acquired with age? She turned towards them, a scowl on her face even as her eyes seemed to remain unseeing. A woman of such appearance rarely invited kindness, Ashura knew. It was a pity, for kindness was free yet ever in short supply. "Grandmother, where did you leave your family? Can we help you in any way?" Ned's words must have struck a chord with her, for as much as her face displayed astonishment and joy, it showed disbelief. Ashura's heart went out to her. Did she not have anyone? "You are kind," the crone chuckled, though her voice was still laced with an undertone of derision, "but you will find no purchase with my family when you return me to them. I have served my purpose. The one that makes decisions for us, my granddaughter, decided I had no more use to them since the same day my last fellow wayfarer on this western shore died, about 20 days past." While Ned did keep a reluctant distance before, he now closed it to the old woman without a second thought. Looking at her with a mixture of compassion and pity, Ashura almost thought he meant to give the old lady arms. She knew that would have been displaced, because for all her wretched appearance, the woman wore clothing of fine make. She was not a beggar. Instead, her man put a hand on the shoulder of the old woman, protecting without appearing to be patronizing. "My lady, tell us. Can we help you seek comfort? Just say the word." Ned did regard all women as my ladies, regardless of station. A good notion, one that spoke of humility. That might have been one of the traits that pulled Ashura towards him, she though as she looked on him fondly. Ha! 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 A throaty, hacked laugh escaped a withered throat. "A family man, I can tell. I am not for long, I have known since my last friend died, though that expression does not capture what we were to each other. Only the last two in West Eos who understood. But then, she's been a ghost for years." Ashura knew they were missing a joke in that statement. There was an accent to her voice, but it was old and washed out. The old lady once more turned to Ashura to speak, and something in her voice might have been frightening once, though Ashura felt the woman was well disposed towards them. "You are lucky, star child. And truly beautiful, inside." Suddenly, unseeing eyes turned seeing, blank grey turned fell yellow, hugging the blackest night in a pupil Ashura had ever seen. "And outside, too, just as beautiful. You two deserve each other, not the fall of swords. You're quiet wolf and you have the gift of choice now. You will not understand, no one ever will again. The web I saw is unwoven. No rubies will litter the fords and no beds will be made of blue roses and blood. You have escaped from the edge of your family's highest sword, but I do not know anymore what the future will bring, star child. Now, I can only see the past." There was something unholy in the wind just then, but the crone only caught a shiver and it had passed. "I have only seen a beauty like you once, you know, but only on the outside. Young man. I believe this will be of import to the Starks of Winterfell, so listen. I am dying, I know, but I have never not returned a kindness." There was something to Ned at that moment. A belief, of a way. Ashura did not know why, but even she felt the crone's words pulling her into a spell. "A queen that was to be came before me once, the beauty I spoke of. Her future is, as all, now unwritten. Will her children bear crowns, will her children bear shrouds? I do not know. She had it in her to be great, but she shackled herself when she asked for her morrows. That all has returned to uncertainty, and I know not why. What I know is this, Cersei Lannister has potential great and terrible, and I was the one to set her on a doomed path once." Ned stirred, his eyes tight at Cersei's name. Why did this old crone talk of her, and why was it important for Ned? Her betrothed, though, was visibly unsettled as he spoke. "My lady. What are you talking of?" It seemed as if Ned wanted to deny a truth neither of them could see, even as it was unveiled in front of them. The woman spoke on, silencing both Ashura and Ned. 6 years passed, when Cersei Lannister was 10, she came to me. That same night, she left her friend Melea Heatherspoon to drown in a well and to be devoured by worms. She knows little of kindness since her mother has died. If you see her, tell her Maggie the Frog releases her from her burden." The crone seemed spent, her eyes turned blind once more. When she said her last words, the weight of her words was lifted and all Ashura could hear was boundless fatigue, though her mind seemed clear as water. "Do not leave my bones for Sybil Westerling and my other grandchildren to find. Give me to the Tumblestone, let the fishes clean my remains. Give me a last kindness, please. I am tired. Quiet wolf. Give my regards to Howland Reed. His great-grandfather knew me." She was gone after another breath, lying dead on the grass. Lord Goran Westerling and his wife Sybil had been looking for an audience with Lord Stark when they had left the inn. While Ashura felt a little shocked at what had just happened, when she looked towards Ned his face showed fear without bounds. They fulfilled the crone's last wish, as if under a spell. Seeing Ned perturbed still, Ashura turned to ask him as she intertwined their hands. "Beloved, what has you so distraught?" Ned looked at her, deeply and despaired, and Ashura did not know what was to come. If Jaime Lannister is not released from the Kingsguard, Cersei Lannister will take up the position of Lady Paramount of the Westerland after Lord Tywine. The Great Lion will take up training her as his heir when he returns to Casterly Rock. Benjen will be her consort, or the two of them will take up their seat in Moat Cailin if her brother returns. Father and I arranged their betrothal yesterday at dinner with Tywine. Notes. Part of this chapter grew out of my discussions with Belnum, Becky_blue_eyes and CK2014 in the comments of chapter 13. Also, this is not part of the double chapter I had announced. I have been struggling with a way to include Meg's scene. I just lacked a way as to how I should include it, and a proper perspective for it. Alone, Meg's swan song would not have filled a chapter. A counterbalance with Ashura to Brandon's POVs now comes earlier than I intended originally. I am happy with the way it connects with Ash's and Ned's arc, though. Don't get me wrong, though, I still regret nothing about yesterday's chapter. That was painfully Brandon. If you felt uncomfortable reading it in part, I achieved my goal. Do tell me your thoughts on seeing the world through Ashura's eyes, though. Chapter 15, Pit. Notes. Title quote. Why do you not see a title quote? Because this is the first part of the announced double chapter, and if I gave you the quote now, I'd be spoiling part 2, and I so hate spoiling things. Also, I'm kind of cheating with this one. Finally, hey, it's a multi-POV chapter. Do not get used to it, even as the next one will be one as well. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. While Brynden did wait with Catelyn for her to overcome the first wave of hysteria, he left her in the care of Shella after. He did not have the time to soothe all the pain, not with their entire house on the precipice. It could not have been 5 minutes since his niece's future broke apart in the courtyard since when he strode into his brother's solar. Obviously, he was the first person to enter since Rickard Stark left. Hoster sat quietly furious at his desk, not working in stormy haste to contain the damage he had inflicted. He did not know yet what he had wrought. Somehow, that only left Brynden angrier. Brynden. My plans will have to be adjusted. Our savage visitor has been banned from Riverrun, the wedding will not come to be. Luckily, there is many an important lord in attendance right now. A new match will have to be arranged, and what better time is there? 7. His brother's ambition would be all of their deaths. Did he really not care about family, duty, honor unless it served him? As furious as Brynden felt for Rickard Stark, he could understand the man. The name of his brother tasted like bile on his tongue. Hoster. The whole training yard heard your lovers spat. You should not look to increase your station, you should look to save your life. You just insulted the king in public. Do you remember what almost happened to the Starks in King's Landing? All the lords in the keep right now speak of you committing lèse majesté. You may burn for treason, you imbecile. While Hoster's face was quickly losing all its color, Brynden only found himself uncaring. However, as the seconds stretched on and nothing happened except Hoster's pallor turning paler, Brynden pulled his offhand knife and stabbed it into the desk in one smooth motion. The noise at least jolted his brother. Hoster. Think, for the god's sake. You just put all our lives in jeopardy. You cannot look further than the Riverlands anymore, you need to bind our bannerman. No. No 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 no. Fucking northern cunt. Damn savage. Fuck. Hoster at least regained some color, even as it was only his face turning red. After a few more expletives, Brynden spied a familiar glint in his brother's eyes though. Suddenly, the solar seemed to shrink. Brother. I did not tell you yet, but the board has been completely overturned today. A letter from the capital came today, addressed to me and Lord Stark. Rhaegar Targaryen has returned in disgrace. Aerys Kingsguard saved Lyanna Stark from being raped by the Crown Prince, the she-wolf is being sent north in the honorable escort of Oswell Went and Arthur Dayne. The capital is about to boil over soon. There was a short lull in Hoster's speech. It helped Brynden digest the news, but it made him dread what his brother hesitated to say. The writing is on the wall, brother, a second dance is coming. We need to support the prince, and early. I have forced our hand today. I am sorry. Fuck. 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 Why did his brother not simply not shout? Hoster. I understand that point. I hate you for it, but I understand it. But I will not agree to help you, unless you tell me what will happen with Cat, Lysa and Edie. We cannot send Lysa to the princess anymore. Any Tully within reach of the king becomes a liability. However, Hoster stopped talking. Something akin to disgust flitted over his face as he spoke on. Brynden, you are right. We need to bind the river lords more tightly to us. The Vances, Pipers and other lords on the western border will stay loyal. The Wents might help for my children, or keep to the king. The Daearys and Mutongs are closer to the throne. However, Bethany Rosby died in childbed last month, birthing a daughter. No. Surely not. No. Hoster could not mean. Could he? The disgust was still there. Please no. Brynden heard his voice break as he asked. He only imagined his eyes looked as aghast as he felt. Walder Frey. The response he got was a hollow laugh. It did not comfort him in the slightest that Hoster did not like this desperate plan. Brynden could already believe himself to smell ashes and wound rot. When Hoster did talk on, Brynden only felt the pit in his stomach grow. Oh, trust me, he will love the offer, brother. He gets what he always wanted, and just because of his position. He won't even have to fight much for us, only block both the Northmen and Seaguard. If only Jeffrey Mallister and Brandon's whole blasted party had died, Jason Mallister would have been first of my men to clamor for lead of the van. Will you support me, brother, like in old times? It did make sense. As much as Brynden hated it all, it was sound tactic maneuvering. He understood tactics. He hated himself for what he was about to do. Family, duty, honor. Family. Yes, brother. Family. Family comes first. Always. Before they set on to make more plans, the steward knocked on the door. A minute later, an unexpected visitor entered. Lord Tully. I would like to offer the hand of my heir Lekine for your daughter. I believe we can help each other in the coming storm. When Brynden did return from talking with his brother to sit with his nieces again, Shella found him a shell of the man who left but 2 hours earlier. She left him to stew a little in silence over the 2 daughters that weren't his until he would rouse himself. He would come to her. She was family. These moments reminded her why her mother had pushed her father to betroth Minissa to the younger Tully brother. A shame. Shella. I need you to help my nieces and nephew. He did not speak on. He only looked at Caitlin and Lysa sleeping side by side, the older sister's eyes red from crying still. Quietly, Brynden and Shella left the 2 a picture of innocence. Brynden looked back a last time as he closed the door. When they sat down in Shella's room, having avoided the servants, Shella topped up their cups with a full Butterwell vintage. Her family kept some of that disgraced family on as retainers for their knowledge as winemakers. She waited for Brynden to quickly drain his cup before starting their dance. Tell me what has transpired in that solar to leave you like this, Brynden. Ha! Transpired. We just planned 4 different types of treason in the span of an hour and put 3 of them to paper. A vassal. A liege. A king. The family. Not even a hollow laugh. Shella had never seen the mightiest warrior of the Riverlands so broken. There are 2 secret betrothals in place right now. Edmure will marry Barbara Bracken and Caitlin Lekine Florent. As the Foxes march on Highgarden with the Talis, we will surprise the Tyrells with a large host from the north. In return, the Blackwoods will be reduced to petty lords as Barbara Bracken becomes the next Lady Paramount of Riverrun, and as the Florents will usurp the reach from Tyrell control for Prince Roriger, Cat will become wife to the future Warden of the South. Hoster proved once more, despite his failings, to be a player of insight with no small talent. It was a gamble, but the odds were uncertain. The man was crafty. At last report, Melissa Florent was pregnant. With Tali on their side and Lytton Hightower's loyalty split between his wife and his daughter, he could be persuaded to join the Foxes. However, these moves would not drive Brynden towards Shella, and part of the situation's premise was missing. What of the Crown Prince? Hoster received the raven today that Aes Kingsguard saved Lyanna Stark from being raped by Roriger. The Crown Prince has returned to King's Landing in disgrace, and an escort of the highest order is to bring the she-wolf home. The capital is divided, as is the realm. A mad king, a rapist prince. We can only support the latter. Madness. This news would split the Riverlands, the Crown lands, the Storm lands and the Reach. Dawn will hold to whoever has their hands on their princess and Prince Egon. The Vale, the North, the Westerlands and the Iron Islands. Shella knew, only because Rickard Stark wanted her to know. Gods, he was testing her. A rider would need to be sent for their camp. Who to barter first? There's more, Brynden said. Alistair Florent has promised the Lannisters Red Lake and Old Oak. Hey. Come now. The Lions don't sell their support that cheap. The idea was laughable to Shella. No. Not their support. Their neutrality. They are given almost a sixth of the Reach for doing nothing while Rivermen and Reachmen go to war. No. Brynden did still not get it. Even their neutrality would not be that cheap. They were being played already. But if Shella tipped Brynden off, she would put any chance of entering the Stark Alliance in jeopardy. She could not do that. Still, Brynden had not said why he had come to her. Why are you here, Brynden? Because tomorrow Hoster wants to betroth Lysa to Walder Free as his seventh wife, and I want you to spirit my niece away from here today before he has a chance to. If Shella had drunken from her wine just then, she would have spit it all over Brynden's face. Walder. Fucking. Free. Oh sweet Sria. She would not lose more family to that misbegotten weasel. However, as much as Brynden knew her thoughts on the matter, such a move on her part would be a clear show of intent to all of Westeros. Shella Went was not someone to be used without getting her due. Brynden, she said, her voice a forced calm, you are trying to play me. You know I hate the Lord of the Crossing. However, I hate more to be played. I will help you. But in return, I own you. Because I will not only save Lysa. I will also help you save Catelyn and try to save Ed Muir. Even Brynden who knew her, regarded her like a person he had never seen. He did not see the politics still. A small part of him, too, thought of her as just a woman. Shella. What are you talking about? Do you know when the war will break out, Brynden? Because I know what you think. I know Hoster is waiting for a summons to the capital. That summon will never get here. The war has already broken out. It seemed that all feeling had left Brynden, or he might just have been too weary to exhibit the incredulity he felt. He did not believe her. How could he? If Rickard Stark had never been summoned, Hoster would not have balked at going to the capital when summoned. No one had truly known how far the depravity of their king had spread. Shella needed to open his eyes, needed him to see, needed him to understand. He would come to her, after. If Rickard Stark had burned in the capital, together with his son and Elbereth Arryn, battles would already be fought now. The moment the old wolf survived his trial, however, a more dangerous kind of war started. A Lord Paramount was almost murdered in a farce. Do you think any lord will ever again answer a summons to King's Landing if that threat hangs over his head? Traitors will litter all of Westeros within moons. But Rickard Stark did not just leave the capital alive, he left it a keg of wildfire waiting to explode, a hungry pit that will grow to engulf the Seven Kingdoms. He set up a succession war and weakened key political factions. He saved the heir of the Vale. He walked out of that fucking cesspool with a princess wrapped as a gift. And now Rhaegar Targaryen has been confirmed a kidnapper and rapist with just as little regard for the lords directly below the king as his father has. Since the news broke, every lord that understood what happened has been raising their levies, forging their weapons and training their armies. The whole continent is not waiting anymore for a war to surprise it to summon its people to the slaughter. All the lords are now stacking their decks because while the war has started, no sides are clear and no one knows friend from foe. This will be the most brutal war Westeros has ever seen because every lord will have all his troops prepared to the best of their ability and their larders prepared for the campaigns. If anyone now tips off the king to start the war early, whoever prevails at the end will see the man die a more horrible death than Aerys ever could. The spider, the Queen of Thorns, the Great Lion, the Old Wolf and all the others will have their spies keep the news of your brother's idiocy from the king and his more stupid advisors, like Merryweather, Rosby and Staunton, from finding out about this before it suits them. Hoster has not only lost the chance to choose a side, he has lost the chance to take the initiative. He will be used up as the pawn that makes the opening move of this war, but even the timing will be dictated by whoever is the first to be ready or too afraid of the other players to be ready. Now. Brindon. If I move to save Minissa's children, save you, do I own you? The silence Shella left in her wake was not one of indecision, but of defeat. Brindon did not have a choice, and he realized that. Family. Brindon breathed out. He did not look surprised, an empty smile on his lips. Family always comes first. I knew this would happen since Hoster asked whether I am with him. Family always comes first. What do you need me to do, Shella? First tell me how the Bracken Blackwood scenario is supposed to play out for Hoster and Caitlyn's marriage to Alekhine Florent. Brindon regarded her for a second before he spoke. There will be an attack on Bracken men-at-arms by the Teats. Hoster will summon both the Blackwoods and the Brackens to Stony September under the name of arbitration, with the Western River Lords in force as witnesses. The Florents will stage their attack on Highgarden at that time, and Cat will be brought to Brightwater Keep by ship. First, Hoster will turn on the Blackwoods and marry Edmure to Barbara. Then, the assembled Riverman army is to fall on the northern reach to take the Tyrells unawares. The tactics were sound. With the Lannisters bribed, no one in the vicinity could muster fast enough to offer resistance. Still, it was necessary to squash that illusion. I need you to be the one Hoster trusts to take Caitlyn south. Until then, you will be a dutiful brother. When you are on the water, you will be taken together with her. The Lannisters will not keep to their peace. How do you know that? Asked Brindon, a little incredulous, a little afraid. Did it not bother you that truly almost every single person of interest heard the screaming match of the Northern Savage and our vaunted Lord Paramount today, Brindon? Think. Who led all of them there? A second of confusion, a second of contemplation, a second of understanding, the dawning of dread. Tijet. It was not a question. Brindon seemed to be in pain. His sister, the Freys. His brother, the Lords. Jeffrey Mallister, the heirs. Jason Mallister sparred a friendly match with Quayan fucking Greyjoy. Who laughed? Oh, how I wanted to kill him. The Arryns. Brandon and Cat. But he did not know. Did he? He looked upon her then, fire in his eyes. Your son. You had a veil for her. You knew. You knew. Shella heaved a sigh. She had known he'd cast that doubt. I didn't. She matched his gaze for a second, and his fire would not melt her steel. I visited his camp early today where I offered him my Linya's hand for Brandon, and he laughed at me. His beard then looked better than it did when you saw him. I had never seen a more immaculately tended one. The priests of Norphos would have been jealous. I also offered mine own hand for his, and he told me to visit him after the show at Riverrun. He only told me to bring a veil with me, and to bring the ladies to the courtyard with my son and Edmure. Said it helped free Jeffrey and that it would give a signal. As much as he played me, I got what I wanted. I am firmly in his camp. As are you now. And you were right. Brandon was just as unawares as me. His heir, though, wasn't. Think on that. Whatever anger Brindon had held on to evaporated visibly. Only disillusionment took its place. He did see the web when made aware of it. Later today, Shella would bring a true boon to the wolves. She would see she'd get her due. As Brindon rose, Shella held up a hand, forestalling him. There will come a time, after Caitlyn is safe, that you are going to marry. Unlike Hoster, I will not be denied when I find a bride for you. Are we understood? She had not thought he could break anymore, but he did. Even you, Shella. You know best, for me there ever only was Minissa. Shella did not have any pity to spare for his sentiment. Despite all, he would never make a politician, even if he grasped the lay of the board. Especially I. I strive to protect her children for you. I will not leave a useful piece aside for the sake of a cherished memory. I do not have the luxury to do so. He left, beaten and broken. Shella did not relish this. Still, there were worse reasons to sell yourself for. Brindon. Minissa. Family. Maester, please do send for Galadon, and Septaroel after. The old man left, leaving him to pore over his letters. The news from the capital had been disquieting since the news of Ricard Stark's botched trial had come in, but dangerous times were also times of opportunity. The seeds he had laid 2 years back had bloomed beautifully last year for a short while, until Barristan the Bold had cut down the hedges that protected them and plucked his flower before he'd had a chance to collect it himself. Still, the prize had been surrendered just because of the possibility it was spoilt. Truly wonderful. The present letters forced him to move up his plans some, but better to be thoroughly prepared for the war to come than be caught unawares, as was usually the danger with such things. Action before reaction, just like with the Ninepenny Kings. And did they not leave opportunities for him with their war? His door opened and his son strode in. His blue eyes were twinkling like sapphires and his straw-blonde hair was still wet. He'd been swimming again. It was difficult to suppress a smile at the sight of his son, so he did not even try. "You asked for me, father." "Yes, Galadon. I know this comes as a shock to you, but you will leave for Stony Helm when you turn 6 in 2 moons to foster there with Lord Gillian." Tears came to his son's eyes, even as he tried not to show them. "But father." "But why? I finally have a sister." He felt old, suddenly, and the tears pricked his eyes as well. He opened his arms and Galadon fell into them as he held him tight. "I know, Galadon. I would love to give you more time seeing her grow. But I need you to stay with the swans. You will even have your own lady to protect there, just like our little gem." The memory of Arianne and Alisan hurt. It was just so raw. Both, gone in the cradle. He'd even held little Alice as her last breath had escaped her. He had cried to all the gods that would hear him as she grew weaker and weaker, but none had heard him. His perfect little girl had still died. "And someday, you'll even marry her. The Lady Jane needs a protector, and she's the apple of her father Gillian's eye. And I promise, you can come visit every year and tell our little Brian about all the things you have learned with the strong marchers." Selwyn Tarth felt the sobs of his son recede at the solemn oath he made and it warmed his heart. He held him a minute longer, but when his heir asked him if he was allowed to visit his mother and sister, he could not deny him. He was barely gone a few moments as his next guest slipped into his solar almost soundlessly. "Septa Roel," Selwyn greeted the fair lady mirthfully, and the young woman could as ever not suppress a small smile at him. "Lord Tarth. What can I do for you? I have need of your expertise." The ploy with Lady Jane already bore fruit. Not 5 days after news of Rickard Stark surviving the King's justice arrived, Lord Swan agreed to the betrothal of Galadon to his poor daughter. The woman in septa robes gifted him a brilliant smile as she answered. A lucky coincidence. The smiling knight was prevented from despoiling her in order to keep her for ransom, even if contrary news to that spread. Indeed, Selwyn pushed out between the laughter the two of them shared. When it died down he finally got to the matter he had called her for. It was not far removed from the last topic, after all. "A war is imminent, and I have a special task for you. Am I to train your levies with the bow? You will find no better shooters after I am done with them, even the marchers will pale in comparison. Even as that would probably be true, the risk for that would outweigh the benefits. No, Septa Roel would need to remain just that in front of his subjects. No, I have a more important task for you. You will have to get in contact with the cousin of a former acquaintance of ours in Myr." Her eyes widened in understanding. For her, it was not difficult to grasp who he was talking about. Still, a defiant glint spread through her eyes as she answered. "I do not care to go to Essos. My vengeance is here. My mother's rapist yet lives. His son, my brother, my rapist yet lives. How am I to eradicate House Caffin from the other shore? He knew she'd make that point. He'd prepared for it. House Caffin will hold to the king. The Golden Company will never have that option. We will stand against them, and we will have an army like few others at our back. While all the others now need to prepare their levies, we can take the initiative like no others. Our location comes as a blessing for this war, we have the initiative on our hands and none to expect us." He had her, he knew. Wenda the White Fawn cared little for the Game of Thrones, only her revenge was what mattered to her. Still, she was not stupid, so she asked the right questions. What can we offer Miles Twain to brave the narrow sea with his troops and his beasts? He knew which other question swung in that sentence. Why, my future Lady of Thornton, with the fastest army at the capital we can offer him almost everything. But the Golden Company is an easy animal to understand still. House Tywin will be re-established after his brother Simon's death with him as the head. Plunder will be aplenty and other former noble houses can be brought back as well. We only need to be the first at the capital. There will be so many sides to this war, they will all clamor for our support when we take the most important beachhead of all. We won't be kingmakers, we will be kingsmakers. And when we have taken King's Landing and we stand at the center of the pit, we will be in the eye of the storm as the heartlands around us tear themselves apart. And they all would tear themselves apart and clamor for his support. The writing was on the wall, the time of the dragons was over. His name is Loras. Mace seemed to think proclaiming the name of his newest babe was an accomplishment. 7. Oaf was not strong enough a word to describe him half the time. It was a babe like any other, pink, shrivelly and squealing. Olenna only hoped the son would not one day go fat like his father. At least Aeleri was not up from the birthing bed yet. A most concerning raven had come. Station demanded that she informed her son of what he had to do going forward. Olenna did not want to think on the possibility of what might have happened had she left for Riverrun and missed this. Days like these she wished her son was competent, even if it would spell the waning of her influence. Bring the little crier back to his mother, we need to have a talk in the privacy of your solar. She did not leave him the time to respond, or worse, decline. She knew her son would follow after, even as he was grumbling about it. Her oath was bad with perceived pressure, even if he should not think to yield to it. Normally, his acquiescence would necessitate a lecture, but more important matters needed to be discussed. Hopefully he would keep his puffy lips shut with his wife after. She'd taken a seat on the leisure table in the solar before Mace came in. If she'd moved to sit at the desk, Mace would have insisted on his high seat, a pointless squabble, really. Now her son simply sat on a level chair in front of her and he did not even notice his power diminish. If someone needs a special chair to exercise and remind you of their authority, you don't leave them to command the seating arrangement. A sentiment many a lord will probably follow in the coming moons, if unconsciously. She'd left the letter out on the tables before her for her son to read. She knew the damning content by heart, it had burned itself into her veins. Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark have arrived at the capital. Kingsguards Arthur Dayne and Oswell Went have confirmed they stopped an attempted rape of Lady Lyanna by the prince. Tensions between the factions of the king and the prince are at their highest point ever. Olenna almost felt the need to give out a defeated sigh as neither concern nor fear nor understanding flit over her son's face. He read it once more before looking at her typically befuddled. As Mace spoke, she just wished he hadn't. Silence is golden. Chatter is worth its weight. This is good news, mother. The lost daughter is returned unharmed. War is averted. We can even stop training our levies. Why did we have to go to the solar for this? My Loras is waiting for me with Aeleri, I don't have time for this. She definitely had not spanked her son enough as a child. Maybe that could be remedied. Through her vines she'd heard how Rickard Stark effectively used slaps to educate his grown son still. Verbal chastisement did not seem to do the trick, but she still had to try. Sit. Her voice was pure iron as he rose to the contrary. He obeyed, luckily for him. It was the same tone he'd already seen her use with Luther, though Mace himself had seldom been on the receiving end of it. Still he did not want her to unleash a lashing with it, it usually left him in realization of his stupidity. This, Olenna said, waving the paper slip, is the worst-case scenario. The best case would have been that the prince saved the lady from some matter of peril. After that, if they had simply run away together, blinded by love. If they'd just stayed gone, disappeared, we would have welcomed it, Mace. Hells, even if he'd managed to rape her and had been welcomed back by the father and supported against the fury of the north and the Stormlands, it might have been the most favorable outcome of all. This letter, though, ensures that the first part of the coming war will be a succession crisis of House Targaryen. The Reach will be hit the hardest of all kingdoms by that split. Mother, Mace said indignant, he was good at that, how can you say such a thing? The third and fourth option are both downright horrible. At least the lady was saved, is that not a good thing? Mace, child, the first three options would let the waves calm down throughout the whole realm and leave the Targaryens with enough time to present a united front against whichever coalition formed against the father's madness. The fourth would also unite all Targaryen and the Loyalists. We'd even know who the enemy would be in that case. As long as our royals are united, no reclord would question their own loyalty towards us. Dawn in their backs would be too much of a threat, seeing how they are tied to the dragons this generation. If the odds for our side are questionable, we could always waste time while besieging some strategically irrelevant castle and let the other powers spend themselves. The Reach can go toe-to-toe with any other 2 to 3 kingdoms united before such an event in manpower and altogether in regards to supplies. After they've spent themselves, we can always sue for peace from a position of strength if the other side prevails. She could see him puff up like he usually did, probably to launch a tirade against the dishonor of such a maneuver. No, Olenna would not sit here and listen to such drivel, so she pressed on, and her son at least deflated a little as the gravity of her words sank in. Another dance, however. That will only pitch Reachman against Reachman. Our strongest vassals would choose the sides that suit them best. We do not have a legitimate claim on Highgarden without the 7 kingdoms. It is always in our paramount interest to remain as paramounts under a united realm. Who are the main threats towards our position as the overlords of the Reach? At least basic positioning had been drilled into the boy, as every Tyrell he knew of the grasping foxes. House Florent ever desires our seat. Well done, Mace. Not really, any idiot in the Reach knew that, but he'd need to start using his faculties somehow, and rote memory questions at least left him with breadcrumbs now. Which are the 7 Reach houses that represent the bulk of the military power of our kingdom in order from strongest to least? He mulled over that for a second before almost beaming at Olenna. Trick question, gods, he was preening at his own intellect. The fool, why did he still treat this like a game? House Redwine's military power, while always in the top 5, cannot be quantified the same way as the others. Their position and navy makes them unassailable themselves and the preeminent power on coast and sea. However, they can't bring their might to bear the same way in the Reach proper. He was still smiling like a child, not even bothering to list the other 6. 7. He was to see the balance of alliances in place, not pride himself on recognizing the prominence of the Redwine fleet. If Olenna said as much as she thought of people, the moniker Queen of Thorns would have long been traded up for something way more sanguine, but she always did like to think she had an admirable level of restraint. So that is all that you can say to my question on the 7 most important houses, House Redwine. Maybe I should go ask Loras for his input. His squealing would tell me more of the other 6 than your foolish silence. At least Mace had the grace to look chastised, a look that suited his sheepish face well enough, before he finally resumed his task, even if his voice came out rather disgruntled after. Besides House Redwine, the mainland houses in order of military importance are Tyrell, Florent, Hightower, Tarly, Rowan and Oakurt. Any coalition of 2 of those houses will probably prevail over a single one of the others. True. Good that she did not have to spoon-feed him that last tidbit. Now which of those houses would the others ever accept as their lieges? He thought for a second, actually, and Olenna felt a sting of pride at that. Wasn't that pathetic in itself? Gods, hopefully Willers proved to be better as he grew. The slew of answers she got after the wait was even surprisingly half-decent. Bless the crone. Well, we are the paramounts despite opposition by the Florents, so I'd say we are accepted enough. Was that a question, Mace? I wonder what a raised eyebrow could express when called for. No, mother, but we stand by grace of our kings as you said. The Florents could usurp us, but they would have to placate the other houses after. Tarly is too closely linked to Marcher culture to keep the peace after, and Hightower will never be accepted as liege after their folly during the dance when they ran with too much ambition. Redwine is removed from the equation for the same reason as their military autarky. Too remote. Rowan and Oakurt could be accepted, but theirs would be a weaker tenure than even Florent. For all his faults, for all his many faults, with enough prodding Mace did usually unveil the knowledge he always forgot he knew. More prodding was in order then. And what of the alliances between the houses, Mace? We can count on houses Rowan and Oakurt, because without us Old Oak and Golden Grove would be isolated against the Westerlands and the Riverlands if it ever came to that, as they would be unable to hold those forces on their own. Florent stands against us, and Lord Tarly has recently married Melissa Florent. The lady is pregnant at the moment, so their alliance is probably ensured. House Redwine has been bound to us for 2 generations, and Paxter will hold to me. Lytton Hightower is my father-in-law. His grandson is already to become paramount. I do not see him moving with the family of his newest wife against us. He read the lay of the board correctly, but he did not see. That was the problem with Mace. In hindsight he'd always realized that he traced the correct conclusions only halfway. Both for better and for worse. Rhea Florent did not marry Lytton Hightower as a bribe, she was an assurance. Flanked on both sides by Florent forces, the Hightowers would be the first to go. They'll now remain neutral for our civil war in this civil war. We need to utilize our ties to Old Town before the fighting starts. Luckily, Alistair Florent, for all his smart moves, has the eyes on the wrong price. He is underestimating what is to come. He only sees Highgarden, because Highgarden was all he ever saw above him. Time for a lesson. She'd need her son to follow her precisely in the coming storm and understand what could happen if he did not. Olenna rose and stepped over to her cabinet in the solar, something she had insisted on even during Luther's time. She did spend more time than him up here when he was alive, after all. Mace seemed nonplussed at her actions, but blanched as she returned with a simple weirwood box lacking usual reach ornaments. Oh, Mace knew the tools of her trade. Olenna, her son addressed her as he only did when he was afraid of her, do you intend to poison Melissa Florent and her child? He did grasp necessary subterfuge, even if he did not grasp subtlety. No, you dolt, just listen. All reach houses of sufficient station have enough clout with the Citadel to grow their own loyal maesters. We cannot allow the shadow of Pariah to hang over our heads even unproven now. What you see before you is the finest box of poison in the reach, better than those of the ladies Malaya Crane, Rhea Florent, your sister Mina, Melissa Florent, Bethany Redwine and Aowen O'Kurt. All those ladies see no further or higher than this box. Together, however, they'd drown my poison with their own. But I see others, just as splendid as mine. Joanna Lannister's was magnificent. Maria Martell's was magnificent, and all three of her children now have their own on par with hers. Cassandra Estermont's was a prize. I have never heard or seen Lyra Stark's fangs, and I feared her for it. Above all else, Rhaella Targaryen. You should have seen her in action before Aerys confined her to the Maiden Vault. Maybe she'll emerge a phoenix from the wildfire that Rhaegar and Aerys are playing with. Florence and Tarlis and Hightowers could not touch us, and the wolves and lions would be faced with a wall once more. Her son followed her so far, even as she still did not understand what she was going for. The Reach is a box of poisons, and we all have our own boxes within. The smaller lords do not see the bigger box that is the Seven Kingdoms, because the Reach is the greatest of the smaller boxes within. In comparison to them, we have to think outside the box that is the Reach. However, no one in the other kingdoms will shackle themselves to us and be drowned in our fights, consumed by our poison and that of our enemies. Why do I tell you all this? There is one thing I have learned, because as a woman playing the game I have always not only warred against the other ladies, but with Luther's enemies as well. I think more outside the box. And there is one thing we need to do before the others take the initiative, we need to look at the next bigger box. Because there always is a bigger box, Mace. There always is. Mace was silent throughout. When his answer came it was only a whisper. What box is there that is bigger than the Seven Kingdoms? Send ravens, Mace, for Paxter and for the Bank of Old Town. We will use all our funds there and the bank's vestigial routes in lies along with the Red Wine fleet to ferry any sellsword company we can gather over from Essos through Volantis and Lies. Recruit through local channels, we do not want to alert the other kingdoms. Tiosh would alert the Dornish to our plans. Keep an eye on the Golden Company as well, we cannot hire them for their stance against the Targaryens, but we need to know who of the others play to break the whole box apart. Her son did not disagree. He did look at her in askance, though. All our funds. We are the third richest house behind the dragons and the lions, should we not prepare to rise after the ashes have settled? Olenna had to laugh at that, and she knew it rang hollow. Mace, you still do not see the scope of the war to come. It will be the greatest war in history. Will we recoup our losses with the spoils then? Mace almost seemed confused, he knew it did not add up. They were sending our money off the continent after all. No, Mace, we will have to shoulder the losses. This whole war will be a money-sinking pit for all of Westeros, taking gold and lives with cruel indifference. Mace was frightened, then. He did not ask more, and shortly excused himself as he ran to hold his newest son. Just like Olenna, for him the family's survival came first. Olenna was truly proud of him in that aspect, the love and loyalty to his family he'd learned at her hand. He even promised not to tell Aelari of their discussion. But even long after he had left, Olenna remained sitting in the Reach's cradle of power, contemplating the box. "Sister-in-law, your husband bids us both to come meet him in his solar." Her brother-in-law only peeked his head through the beady curtains hanging in the doorframe to tell her before he left, not even waiting as she picked up her baby son to follow him. Noon had already passed, so the heat was passable, still she did not relish to sit on her throne right now under the blazing sun shining through the leaded glass above. Her husband had already taken his seat under the spear, as the male rulers of his line always did. Her old friend was the only non-family member in attendance beside Melorio, Doran and Oberyn as the Prince of Dawn beckoned her to take her seat beside him. The letters in his lap coupled with his troubled expression left her with ominous trepidation. The last they had spoken had been a screaming match as passionate as their love-making. She could not believe Dawn and all of Westeros followed such barbaric traditions, to wrest children from their mother's breast and let strangers raise them instead. Never would she give up her baby to be raised by people to assuage their grudge against her brother-in-law because Oberyn killed their father. Her little Quentyn had not even turned 1 year old yet. When Doran looked at her though, defeated but full of love, she could not be angry in that moment. He reached for her hand as she took her seat at his side, and it like always just fit so perfectly. One last vulnerable look at her before he faced his brother as the prince. "Oberyn, I need you to do penance by Ormond Euronwood for the death of his father in your trial by combat." Melorio felt hopeful, Melorio felt afraid. Quentyn would not have to foster away. What news came with the letters to make Doran change his mind? She knew she herself hadn't. One look at her brother-in-law and she saw him a betrayed man. "Why, brother?" His voice was barely above a whisper as he spoke. Melorio saw Aeryo tense by the door. "Why are you sending me to my death, brother? You know I did not poison my spear that day." Despite his princely mask, Melorio saw the pain in the eyes of her beloved. He picked up one of the 2 letters in his lap. Melorio recognized the script. Her sister-in-law always wrote in such beautifully flowing letters. "Elia has written." As Doran spoke, Melorio saw Oberyn notice the pain in his brother also. "Prince Rhaegar has returned and our worst fears have come true. He has tried to rape Lady Lyanna, only to be prevented by the Kingsguard. Now Aerys seeks to set him aside as his heir and nominate Viserys, even if those notions aren't public yet." Where Doran felt sorrow, Oberyn felt fury. While Melorio knew both men to be as dangerous as the other when called for, she was always more afraid for her brother-in-law's lack of foresight and lack of regard for consequences. Still she marveled at the leash her husband held, as with just a raised hand his brother calmed enough to at least listen. The letter tells of more. Elia has the Queen's support for Aegon, not openly but in writing. You do not know of Rolla before she had her wings clipped, but Mother always talked of her as a friend that should still be feared. The younger Martell did listen, he just sometimes did not care. When he answered he did not even bother to hide a sneer. "And what has this great queen done since Lord Stark walked out of the capital, waiting for the city to burn behind him? That is a worrying matter, actually. Rolla Targaryen has made no moves as of this letter since Rhaegar has returned and seemed not to be about to take any, according to Elia. Our sister thinks she already has. A raven went east not a day after Lord Stark left. Furthermore, the Holy Hundred and the Faith have been on the move. Rolla goes to pray daily." The implication was heavy, and Melorio only felt herself sink into a black pit of dread. Coming from a city under the hold of the bearded priests, one of the first things she read up on was the politics of faith on her new continent. Doran must have felt something from her grip, for she felt his thumb soothingly circle the back of her hand. "Worry not, Mel. The rise of a new faith militant would see the Targaryens betrayed left and right and deposed in a heartbeat. No, this is likely putting a piece into place to influence the small folk when opportunity arises." Oberyn broke their moment, though she could not fault him for it. His concern was obvious as he spoke. "Did Elia write of engaging Lord Stark again? Are we to thank him for taking Rhaenys as his hostage?" "She did not mention it, but we are." An official letter of his has invited you to Winterfell to make certain Rhaenys is well cared for. You are even allowed an armed escort of unlimited capacity, provided we pay for supplies and lodging of each spear above the 20th. That shut Oberyn up. Doran was not finished though, as he held up a second letter now. What has me sending you to Euronwood is this letter, though, which was brought here in person. I believe it is also by Lord Stark. It speaks of an interesting alternative to the Iron Throne. Oberyn looked at his brother incredulous. Are you expecting me to betray Elia and Aegon? We stand on the cusp of greatness like never before, Doran. Why would we risk that? Because Elia and Aegon and Rhaenys would be safer as Martells, Doran said, and because if we don't present ourselves as reliable and worthy partners to whichever side we end up picking between Aegon's and the Starks, we will only lose in the coming war. We need all of Dorne behind us now, not after Quentyn has grown old enough to ward there. Convince Ormond Euronwood of your innocence or not, but bring him back into the fold. You may continue to Winterfell afterwards. Do it for Elia and her children. Oberyn did not look happy, but he was placated. Quentyn would not have to leave to be raised by people that hated his family. Melorio almost felt happy, but as Doran turned towards her and did not drop his princely face, she knew that whatever was to come for her was worse than what Oberyn would have to face in Euronwood. She had only been bribed with the fact that Quentyn would not be parted from her. Go on, love, she spoke, her voice of a hollow strength. What do you need of me? He looked at her then, with sadness and love and pity. This war will stretch beyond Westeros, Mel. Bravos will be the first to be involved, first through the Iron Bank, then through whatever play the key holders and the Sea Lord decide on. Penthose will see the leash slacken and try to push its limits. Likely, it will fail, but many a magister there is rich and likes to play from afar in many a business. With Westeros concerned with itself, the war over the disputed lands is likely to extend to the Stepstones. The elephants reign in Volantis, so they will not fight, only fund. Slavers Bay and the Summer Isles will not involve themselves directly, but opportunity for easy slaving raids will increase, so that the first will move to grasp them and the other will seek to punish in turn. Melorio saw the web, all the pieces falling into place. Doran was scary in these thoughts, because he so often was proved right. She completed his tale for him. And so, with the Dothraki binding Qohor and Bravos focus on the west, Lorath will be up for another power to increase their pressure. Norphos has ever been striving to acquire its spot on the Shivering Sea. But how are you going to bring Norphos to your side? The grass that hid the viper showed why it should be feared in itself, for it was a scary thing indeed. Ebenese fishing and whaling raids have increased, so the Lorathi have hired a sellsword company to deter them. The Second Sons. While Oberyn's contacts there have withered, their paymaster Tybur is in my books. At my word he will open the gates to the city when Norphos comes knocking as my friend. Lorath held more than 70,000 people, maybe more than 100. It was difficult to count throughout the sprawling islands. All those she would deliver to the hounds of a god she did not know, one that held her home city under his yoke. She smiled at her husband then, with tears in her eyes. I think I would like to introduce Quentyn to the other side of his family. Do you give me leave to return to Norphos for a few moons with him, my love? And Doran's grey-black eyes met her green ones as he squeezed her hand once more and stroked through her ebon hair with his fingers as he answered. Mel, my love. A ship for Tioche will be prepared to leave at your leisure. Take Aeryo and my cousin Mamfrey with you to keep you and Quentyn safe. Syrio Forel, First Sword of Bravos, had a rather uncommon task to complete today. The Sea Lord had asked him to replace a guard at the Iron Bank. There were 2 visitors expected today that were in possession of vital information of the increasingly chaotic situation in Westeros. He disliked leaving the care of his charge to the Second Sword. The man was at best in the top 6 of the city. But the reasoning for his attendance could not be denied. Syrio did see all things for what they were. The man to receive today's vaunted guests as head banker was a member of House Ryan and a key holder himself. The men were both of sufficient station to require the courtesy. The great doors to their central chamber opened and a man strode in, tall and fair, of Valyrian stock and uncommon beauty. No man of the pleasures, this, despite the common fate of men with his ancestry, and neither one to indulge in the same. He wore silks today of the finest make, but Syrio saw the man preferred to be dressed in armor. Leather, for the man was also of the sea. A soldier, that's what he was. The crier standing at the side of the room introduced the man. Presenting the master of ships of the seven kingdoms, lord of the tides and master of driftmark, Lucius Valerian, envoy of the Iron Throne. The foreign lord did not wait any longer to take his seat. The three bankers he was to deal with remained unconcerned. The invitation to sit alone would presume it was theirs to extend, and despite their position they were still only cogs. However, even for lords did iron not bend, so neither did the Iron Bank. Has the Iron Bank not made its position clear to the hand Tywin Lannister that it will not extend any more loans to King Aerys II after his threats against the city of Braavos in 267 AC 15 years ago? While the former hand did pay the outstanding debt himself, we have been of the understanding that Lord Tywin had resigned his post last year, has he not? The Lord of the Tides a useless title, for no man controlled ebb and flow tensed his jaw and Syrio saw him for the poor politician he was. A soldier, that's what he was. I am not here on behalf of Aerys Targaryen, Lucius Valerian said truthfully, but on behalf of the Iron Throne. While the two deputy bankers of this meeting looked up abruptly, Keyholder Ryan simply inclined his head with a smile as he spoke. Are we to understand that you come to us, then, in the name of Rhaegar Targaryen, heir to the Iron Throne? The glib face of the head banker betrayed nothing, but Syrio saw the smaller cogs turning within him. The answer of the foreign lord stopped the clockwork, though, and even Syrio was surprised as the vaunted visitor spoke his next words, all of which the man perceived as the truth. Yes. No. Maybe. Lord Valerian did not falter as he talked, his intent was unwavering. As to my most recent knowledge, I left Driftmark 25 days ago and the Crown Prince was missing at that point in time. This was known to the bankers. As was the freshest news from the Western Shore, that had only arrived today and was only known to the upper echelon of the city. The Sea Lord had seen fit to impart Syrio with that intelligence. Keyholder Ryan contemplated the man in front of him for a second. After a second, he whispered to the two deputies at his side who rose without question and took all but two guards with them as they left. One of the guards left was Syrio, the other a mute that could not write. Syrio had seen him for what he was. Whatever developed out of the following talks, the risk that the man could pass on what he heard would be infinitesimally small. The Iron Bank knows as of today that Crown Prince Rhaegar and Lady Lyanna have returned to King's Landing. The accusation of attempted rape against the lady has been confirmed by two Kingsguards, as their intervention against the crime. As Keyholder Ryan spoke, Syrio saw the master of Driftmark visibly resign into himself. Still, the man found his steel and straightened his spine before addressing the banker before him. In that case I speak in the name of Queen Rhaegar Targaryen, Queen Regent to His Majesty King Aegon Targaryen VI of his name, King of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, Protector of the Realm. Long may he reign. The Iron Throne seeks to enter into negotiation with the Iron Bank of Braavos. Syrio saw it, then, he saw it true. The Sea Lord had told him a war like no other was coming, and Braavos was to reap great profits. But Syrio only saw the pit, deep and black and hungry, he saw it in the steel of Lucius Valerian's spine and in the gold in Keyholder Ryan's eyes. And as the two men talked the death of countless, the pit only grew. Lucius Valerian left after the sun had passed its zenith. The room had already been refilled with two new deputies, a new crier and a new group of guardsmen before the great doors opened again. The new arrival was no soldier, but a warrior. White of hair and beard, full in breadth but cropped close. The man was of tan skin and had eyes the color of smelted iron. A West AOC, too. This one wore armor, well used but in impeccable condition. Leather as the other Lucius Valerian would have preferred to have been dressed in today, but this was no man of the sea. Wandering eyes looked throughout the whole room as the man sauntered slowly towards Keyholder Ryan and the deputies at the table. As he made his way the crier announced him. Presenting the Commander General of the Wolf Pack and the Commander General. Stop. The new arrival spoke that one word as he raised a hand. The man took a last look at the three bankers before slowly walking in a circle through the room, first looking at the crier and then at each of the guards. He came to a stop in front of Syrio himself, and his face morphed into a smile. A feral thing, though, and the man's eyes remained iron. Your information is outdated. I never was Commander General of the Wolf Pack, as it has been incorporated into my original company and their forces were absorbed. The man's eyes did not leave Sirius as he spoke, and besides the iron within Sirio now also saw blood. Despite his age, this man would easily gut the second sword of Bravos. Even Sirio would not be sure if he could deny death the day if they stood opposed to another with swords in their hands. This was a man who saw Sirio like Sirio saw the man. Just a tiny bit, Sirio felt fear. It cut deeper than any sword. The title a member of House Stark wears when he leads the Company of the Rose is Prince in Exile, though I am the first man of House Stark to take up this vaunted position. I am Roderick Stark, and I have come to negotiate on behalf of Rickard Stark, the King of Winter, with the Iron Bank of Bravos. During his whole introduction, Roderick Stark's smiling iron eyes did not waver, staring into all of Sirio's fears. But Sirio saw behind the man, and he saw all the others beside keyholder Ryan Blanche. When Roderick Stark left the Iron Bank after dusk had fallen, only sparing head banker Ryan, Sirio had to execute the crier, the two deputies and all the guards in the room. Even the mute. Chapter 16, Ladder. Notes. The Realm. Do you know what the Realm is? It's the thousand blades of Egon's enemies, a story we agree to tell each other over and over, until we forget that it's a lie. But what do we have left, once we abandon the lie? Chaos. A gaping pit waiting to swallow us all. Chaos isn't a pit. Chaos is a ladder. Many who try to climb it fail and never get to try again. The fall breaks them. And some are given a chance to climb. They refuse, they cling to the realm or the gods or love. Illusions. Only the ladder is real. The climb is all there is. Varys and Peter Baelish, Game of Thrones, Season 3 Episode 5, The Climb. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Taking Lysa away unseen did not prove to be much of a challenge to Shella. Hoster had other problems to occupy him. He would not care about his younger daughter today and he would not step up to Walder Free with his proposal before tomorrow. No, that would seem too desperate and too grasping. Either tomorrow or the day after at the earliest. But even as Minissa had died years ago, Shella did still own a good fifth of all the servants of Riverrun. This move could never be kept secret for long, it was the initiative that mattered. Of course, Hoster could always retaliate, but he would be lacking support and the power to take Lysa back in this case. So, Shella left a letter behind thanking Hoster that he had transferred Lysa into her care to look after. He'd see this the move of a sentimental and foolish woman. Idiot. Linya had been charming Jeffrey Mallister while she talked loyalty and betrayal with Brynden. The boy was never a prospect and as soon as Linya tried to move the subject towards the old wolf, Jeffrey shut his mouth faster than a proper Septa did her legs faster at the mention of Oberyn Martell. 5 years and still the faith cursed him from Old Town to King's Landing, no matter what else they all disagreed on. Simon had been sent down into the village as soon as Edmure had been disentangled from him, and true to form as Rickard Stark had said, everyone knew of Lysa Tully's dead bastard. How far, how long had the wolves infiltrated the Riverlands that they could spread this information so quickly with none to know where it came from? Or did they use Ironborn leftovers that were somehow kept alive after the conquest? No, that was as unlikely as those isolationist falcons spreading the news. The implications were chilling. Did this network only spread through the countryside? Were there any spies seeded amongst the castles? Most importantly, were any of her own spies working as double agents? She had never suspected Rickard Stark of guile before his visit to the capital, but now everything new she learned about him scared her. Still, other players less focused on the Riverlands probably did not even know how dangerous this man truly was. Shella blessed her luck for throwing in her hat early with the wolves. Shella bade farewell to the other lords quickly and sent Lysa with some of her guard to travel with a litter cross-country and join up with Lord Blackwood when he left for Raventree Hall. At the same time, 2 decoys were dispatched to divert Hoster's attention if he proved unreasonable. She pulled Tytos aside so he knew to expect her package and convinced him to visit her as soon as he arrived at home under any flimsy excuse. She did not even have to make an overly obvious reference to the Brackens. The fresh lord had gotten a quick appreciation for her on their ride to Riverrun. Halfway on the way to the Starker Inn camp did their party meet another going the other direction. The first amongst their standards were the Westerling shells on sand, followed by their up-jumped merchant bride's house. They made for a harsh pace, and Sybil Spicer did not look happy on her high horse. Did they not, then, see the writing on the wall that the wolves banded with their betters? Sheller did not think the lions would be displeased with mere clams over this issue. The Westerlings were ever loyal, but that grasping new lady required watching. As they arrived at the wolves' camp, they were received by Ashuradain and Elberutarin, almost none of the true movers and shakers awaiting them. Sheller would have almost been offended, she knew her own worth, but the resplendent lady quickly assuaged her displeasure at being treated as insignificant with only a few choice words and a brilliant smile. Sheller always thought herself above flattery, but the starling had the making of a great diplomat, without a doubt picked up in the capital and already trained before. Linya quickly tried to insert herself at the young falcon's side, who displayed a mixture of embarrassment and elation at the attention. Typical Vale Knight, the amateur. However, he also could not hide a small hint at exasperation, which in turn gave Linya pause. The Lady Ashura quickly and smoothly cut in between the two, freeing the trapped bird. Linya would have to work better at schooling her irritation, Sheller noted at that. However, their talk quickly progressed to marriage talks directly, and when Ashuradain leaned in to whisper something to Linya, Sheller only saw her daughter redden with a smile before becoming a lot more responsive to the Dornish woman. Elberutarin stepped up to her, but was entirely unreceptive to banter. Straight like a knight's lance, though he did smile at some of her commentary of her daughter. It wasn't that the boy did not understand the game, Sheller noted, he was just schooled to play on a different field and he knew it. A little time passed until a Stark guard approached Ashuradain with what Sheller saw to be a mix of an astonishing amount of reverence, a large helping of fear, and just a sliver of suppressed lust was the wrong word, Sheller decided. Appreciation, she decided. The fear had won out over the baser form of the man's instinct. The Dornish star bore watching, she reaffirmed. Only a few moments after the watchman had stepped away again, Lady Dane led them in silence to enter the back of the largest tent outside the inn the Starks had rented, and motioned for Sheller to spy through a slit peephole in the canopy into the main room of the tent as she noticed the words ringing in her ears. "Less, and justice to all, and I shall never fail you. I swear it by earth and water. I swear it by bronze and iron. I swear it by ice and fire." Sheller went spied Stephen Free kneeling in front of the Warden of the North and his heir as he spoke the first men's oath of fealty, and she could not believe it. All her reports from Sria spoke best of Stephen amongst the phrase. No, that did not do the man justice, the letters spoke good of Stephen Free. Of a Free. And there the man knelt, in front of a paramount that was not supposed to be his own, witnessed by his Lannister sister-in-law and the Warden of the East, betraying his father. As Sheller went slowly pulled back from her spy hole, she found Ashuradain to be attentively watching her. After a second they shared a smile. She heard rustling from the other side of the curtain and the tent flap open and close before Lady Dane swiftly stepped through the hanging veils and stepped up to Rickard Stark's second son, whose countenance visibly softened. While Stephen Free had already left, Sheller was a little surprised that his sister-in-law had remained. Still, it only served her interested to be acquainted with all the upper echelon of this conspiracy of theirs. "Lady Went, I am delighted to see you again so soon. I had hoped you would return today ever since your visit to our camp in the morning. I do hope the Lady Caitlin and young Lord Edmure are coping with the events of this day. I bear them no ill in this." Lord Stark seemed utterly sincere as he sternly spoke to her and her children. Simon sat straighter at his words, too obviously wary of the man to serve him well, and even Linya did not manage to hide a sliver of fear. A kind smile was shot their way, shining through his freshly oiled beard. My, did Rickard Stark look stately in his grey and white doublet. Sheller did not recognize the man from Riverrun. "Please, my lord, won't you call me Sheller? After all, I did offer my hand in marriage this morning and you have not declined me yet." A simpering smile, a fluttering of her lashes, and just as today in the morning when Linya's suit was presented, the Wolf Lord chuckled a deep, sonorous laugh. "You are a delight, Sheller. It would please me if we are to become more familiar. Though I am sorry to say that I have to decline the offer of your hand. I do hope that does not impede our growing friendship. Just Rickard is fine for me, among such a circle of friends as we are sitting here." His was a smile of knives as Jenna Lannister sized her up from the side and Eddard Stark and Jon Arryn regarded her with a stony look hiding whatever they were thinking. Those two were no politicians, but they were unlikely to be played by one as well. Elbert seemed a little confused, more than Simon, while Ashur-dan beside the heir to the north was all kind smiles and starry eyes, and Linya tried to emulate the picture of innocence the Dornish presented. "Of course we are friends, Ricard." Shella almost breathed the words. "I have even brought gifts with me. Hoster Tully received a raven from the capital regarding your daughter." It was terrifying to behold. Not a single muscle moved in Ricard Stark's smiling face, yet the eyes of the man suddenly promised gruesome death and untold horrors. While the Arryns remained rather stoic to the development and Jenna Lannister only subtly started to pay even more regard to the old wolf, the silence of the young wolf in the room only seemed to grow more oppressive. The lady by his side squeezed his hand reassuringly as the son's unblinking eyes took out the father's. Something unsaid passed between them, but Shella could only fathom at it. Still, she'd seen what she wanted. Despite all, the Starks were a family above all. A trade up from Hoster, but having just taken Lysa, Shella was not blind to the inherent debilities such a reliance caused. Not wanting to unnecessarily increase the tension, Shella spoke on. "Sir Arthur Dayne and Sir Oswell Went prevented Prince Roriger from raping your daughter. The prince has returned to the capital in disgrace as tensions between the factions of the king and the prince are rising. Lady Lyanna is to be returned to you with an honor guard consisting of the 2 heroic knights and 50 men-at-arms of House Targaryen." The fury of the old wolf did not lessen one bit, but the heir and his lady could not hide their elation at this revelation. "That," the wolf lord said with just a hint of his accent shining through and a bloody smile on his lips, "is the situation I had most hoped for. Shella, you are a gift. Let me give you 3 gifts in return, for I am ever a generous man." She returned his smile in silence, even as she grew wary without end. "In the north we are lacking in knights, and I am ever gracious to our queen, for she has agreed to fund the rebuilding of Moat Cailin, which I have elected to confer upon my youngest son. I intend to help him build his household, and I believe your son Simon would make a splendid master-at-arms after a few years as an officer in my guard at Winterfell. Do you not agree?" Shella could only give a tight nod in answer, even as her son abruptly turned towards her with a pleading look. A hostage to be traded, but not one high in the succession. Still, Ricard Stark had been a lone father for 15 years now. He could understand the love of a mother as well. "Secondly, though I regret to inform you that the offer of the hand of your daughter has been refused for my son Ned, Elbert Arryn, Geryon Lannister and Oberyn Martell, however, the heir to Runestone and Royce has come to love her from afar and is so eager to press his suit that no dowry is expected. Of course, I would be thankful if you could lend your signature to the letters I am to send to Casterly Rock, the Eyrie, Winterfell and Sunspear, in which we thank the house heads for their support in this match after the other suits fell through. A bribe, this, with a warning attached." Now it was her daughter's turn to look at her in askance, if not in fright. She did not believe her mother to have attempted to barter her flesh away to all these men, but she did not understand what was spoken about. Runestone was a match Shella would have had to offer at least a lord's ransom for. Still, Shella would gift her daughter the best lady's box to help her in the new waters she was to brave. The implication, though, that her new coalition had already had cause to believe that Dawn was to join them hinted at prior communication, and the implication was stunning. Who had made these moves? "The 3rd gift is a wedding for yourself, even as I regret I had to decline your hand myself. Lord Arryn believes his future domain should build friendly relationships to other High Lords and has allowed for Quayan Greyjoy to present his suit for you. I believe I heard a rumor that Walter Went mentioned his intent to join the Honorable Order of the Night's Watch. Is that not true? Congratulations, Shella my friend, you are moving up the ladder." Slowly but smoothly Shella clasped her hands together and inclined her head in thanks, hoping it managed to hide her shaking. She had sold herself high, her ambition of paramountcy in her grasp. So the Riverlands had already been redistributed. Went and Mallister and Free, and who else? There was no retreat for her now. Her question might as well be blunt. "Thank you for this gift, Lord Stark, Lord Arryn. Am I to proclaim my fealty to the Eyrie, my liege?" The older man offered a chuckle and a wave of hand. "Please, Lady Went. Such is not required of Leal Bannerman without an audience." Ricard, my cousin Sria had always only the best words to share on Stephen of all the phrase. "What did you discuss with him earlier?" At her question Ricard Stark only turned his head a little. She was surprised to hear Ashura speak up from the side. Lady Jenna was most interested in this new perfume I brought with me. It is in the Lysani style, those people have made an art of it, I tell you Lady Went, but this one is particular to Dawn. I swear people above the Red Mountains know naught of it, you use other herbs up here for it. Still, we are somewhat famed for it, especially us women. Then again, our princess' favorite brother is known to dabble in it as well, but nobody really wants to know what my friend Oberyn is up to half the time. Oh my, I did not mean to ramble on like that. I hope I did not bore you, Lady Went, thoughts of home do carry me away sometimes. What my son's betrothed wanted to arrive at, is that at Lady Jenna's behest we closed a deal to use the twins' advantageous position and increase our trade in exotic products, both from the marshlands of the Neck as well as from our future influx in trade from Dawn. Lord Stark cheerily wove on the web of lies with the Dornish woman. A most delightful girl, Shella decided. She would definitely exchange some tinctures with her, and after all, a steady correspondence with the future Lady Stark could only be to her benefit. The most important bachelor of the North and the Dornish princess bosom friend, emphasis on bosom, who would have thought. Still the girl seemed to be a boon herself, the obvious affection only helped. The wolf boy in front of her must have hidden depths beneath his quiet surface if he managed to charm the fiery woman at his side still. Shella had been surprised when her brood in the capital had informed her of this steadily growing bond, herself having first-hand accounts of the fast the former Stark heir proclaimed at her castle about Ashura. Thinking of Eddard Stark's brother reminded her of another matter she had yet to mention. Oh, Lady Ashura, those perfumes sound lovely, maybe we can talk more on them. You must have used them to charm your handsome husband at the Eyrie. You fostered there, did you not, Lord Eddard, along with Robert Baratheon? How come the Lord of Storm's End did not travel with you but is following to arrive here in about 4 days after today? There was a short lull in the conversation, but while Rickard Stark's face gave nothing away, Jon Arryn betrayed his surprise at this news. Gods, the charging stag was rudderless and lacking a handler apparently. Still there was not even a break before the old wolf took the reins and spoke up. Shella, why do you not stay a few more days with your children? We had intended to throw a small feast in 5 days to announce the betrothal of my heir to his lady, but Ned did not want to celebrate without his brother in all but blood. A few more friends only make for more of a merry company. She had not expected a reversal of the like, but what surprised her was the most was a small predatory glint that came over Ashura eyes. The young woman even batted her lashes at Shella, her voice the chime of a laughing bell. Oh, please, Lady Shella, do stay. I swear you have not seen the like of a feast thrown by Northmen, I promise you will find yourself well entertained. I do believe Linya must have brought a stunning dress for the wedding, let's not deny her the chance to wear it. I would put my perfumes at your perusal, I'll even let you keep one that you like. We both would be delighted to share this moment with friends new and old. Eddard Stark spoke for the first time since Shella had seen him as his promised gifted him a soft smile. I met Ashura dancing under your roof, I can think of no better company for this occasion. We even might have a few songs you have not heard yet here in the Riverlands. Shella did not see the harm in that, and her children did seem excited at the prospect. Linya's and Simon's days in the Riverlands were numbered now, best to make the most of it. Ashura beamed as Shella agreed, and Jenna Lannister was asked to extend an open invitation to the men of the Westerlands. The young Stark bride-to-be quickly pulled her Linya up to her room to go about preparing the party on such short notice. Jenna Lannister did not pretend to linger with Lord Stark and quickly left afterwards, taking Stephen free with her and her own husband, who seemed to have been occupied by some of the people in the retinue of the Arryns. Rickard Stark did hold back Shella for a second, but only to bid her to send a raven for Daeari on his behalf, as he did not care to bother any of the knightly houses around that were unfamiliar to him. The old wolf quickly penned a letter to his daughter ordering her to travel on to Winterfell and to reunite with him there, continuing to follow the King's Road after Daeari. Afterwards he left, sending out his guardsmen to invite the surrounding small folk with abandon and empty all the other inns around of food, mead, ale and wine for the feast. Lastly, some men returned to Riverrun disguised as merchants to cheaply buy some of the food stocks prepared for the wedding and spread an open invitation to all the lords in attendance except the Tullys. The move could be seen as an uncouth but effective slight against Hoster, to barter away the prize the man had sought to another at the Riverlord's home soil, as could be expected of an uncivilized Northman. or as an effective way to draw the impromptu court of alliances from Riverrun towards Lord Stark's own controlled domain and challenge Hoster's authority over his own bannermen, as could be expected of a skilled politician and master manipulator. And the people would come. Hoster would rage, Hoster would plead, and Hoster would lose. He could not command his lords to stay away, not when all the lords of the other kingdoms would flock to this inn. Bumbling savage or master of the game, as ever with Rickard Stark, the people would only see in him what they were ready to see. And to think he threw the plan together on the spot as he heard of Robert Baratheon approaching. Once more Shella was ecstatic at having come under the wolf's protection. Lady Paramount. Even if she should lose in the war to come, she'd never expected to climb so high. John, do you have a minute? His younger foster son took him out early in the morning the day after Shella had been welcomed into his fold. Kyle had already sent a raven to Runestone to notify his uncle the Bronze Lord of the betrothal of his son to Lady Linya late in the night, so John was still tired. Yon was one of his bannermen more aware of the plans being made, though, so urgency was due for the proper information to be disseminated to him at the right time. However, a little tiredness would not be enough to keep John from helping Ned if he needed it. Even if a proper bed after days in the saddle was very tempting. His son in all but name came into his room, looking a little exhausted but ecstatic nonetheless. He'd had that spark to his eyes since bringing Ashura to the Eyrie from Gulltown, and John could not be happier for him, especially as today both Ned's exhaustion and elation seemed to have reached another level. The official betrothal seemed to have worn him out a little in the night. His eyes were shining like dew mist at dawn as he spoke. I need to speak with my father soon, and I'd like to have you at my back when I approach him. At this Ned hesitated for a second before talking on. Ashura thinks she might be pregnant. I want to break camp for Winterfell 2 days after the feast at the latest, and be wed as soon as we reach home. It would give Shura the chance to have Sir Arthur give her away. And I would like for you to be there with me. It would mean a lot to me. Ned. Son. Of course I'll come. That's wonderful. But yes, we'll have you two get married as soon as possible. How are you holding up with these news? John again felt that familiar sensation, joy and dread. His family had grown just yesterday, and today the future looked bright. He desperately tried not to think of his 5 dead babes, but he knew he was making a poor attempt at a smile. However, Ned did not question him as he spoke. He was a man that understood how to read the nuances of silence. Euphoric. Terrified. I want to shout it out to the world but tell no one. I fear that I can never be a father. I thought I was afraid of the war to come an hour ago. Now I know, I did not truly know fear. My boy. I am ever thankful for the day I asked your permission to call you son. John looked at his northern ward, taking him by the shoulders. I was afraid that day. I had already come to love you as a son, but I did not know if you reciprocated my feelings. You are quiet sometimes, you know that. His son shared one of his quiet smiles, the one he only gifted to a trusted few. Let me tell you what my father once told me when I was a young boy. I usually only tell the words, but I trust you to keep this silent. I was afraid of heights. Can you imagine that? I, the future Lord of the Eyrie, was afraid of heights as a young boy. John did not think Ned capable of releasing a snort, but he was proven wrong. My father took me aside, then, and imparted on me the words that shaped my house words to be more than just as high as honor. Just like the pack survives when winter comes, as you have once told me, honor lies in braving the challenges life throws at us that make us pause. If, like for me today, your son ever comes to you and tells you he is afraid of something, tell him that is the only time a man can be brave. That way lies honor, for one is fighting to overcome oneself. The only time a man can be brave is when he is afraid, and a brave man will soar as high as honor. His son did not answer, for nothing needed to be said. John pulled him into a tight hug and never wanted to let go. When he did, he told Ned to bring Ashura to the tent outside and meet him and Rickard there. It was time to share the news and to reveal to Lady Dane the full extent of what they would bring about. The 4 of them came together not 10 minutes after, and while on Ned's face the euphoria had decidedly won out, Ashura's emotions still seemed to be fighting for supremacy. Even Rickard spied the woman to be conflicted, where before this moment John had never seen his son's love to wear such a weakness on her face. As the pair sat across from them, their intertwined hands kept twitching as Ashura looked at anything but Ricard's face. Ned did not have this shadow of uneasiness stopping him, but he changed the grip of Ashura's left hand into his own to support her with his right in the small of her back. With Ashura he was just so natural. Only then did he speak to his birth father. "Father, I plead to you, let us leave as soon as possible after the betrothal is announced. I want to be safe back in Winterfell and happily wed before Ashura shows that she is carrying your first grandchild." Ricard Stark's head immediately turned to Ashura, who still did not look at him. If she had, she'd see that there was nothing but warmth in his gaze after a fraction of a second. As she wouldn't raise her head, Ricard rose and walked up to her, only to take a knee in front of her and grasp her remaining hand into both of his, fixing her eyes with his own finally. "Daughter," he spoke softly, his voice raw and tender, "the growth of the pack is only ever a wonderful gift." Ashura heaved a sob as a lone relieved tear escaped her before Ned put a finger under her chin to gently make her look at him. "My love," he said intently, and she smiled. "My wife," he said longingly, and she shined. "My queen," he said, and she looked at him in question. "You are carrying the youngest prince or princess of the re-established and soon-to-be-proclaimed Kingdom of Winter," he said, and Ashura showed awe and love and shock and fear and disbelief. That moment Jon saw the daughter of his son realize that the ladder had no ceiling and all she knew growing up would change more than she had thought possible. But that was always the way of the world when a new child strove to enter it. The four of them spoke then, of the joy of parenthood, of Ned as a child, where both Jon and Ricard managed to embarrass their son enough to grow red, and of the great and terrible war to come and how they wanted the world to look like when it was finished. And after that it was calm for 4 more days, until Jon's other son arrived on the day of the betrothal feast. The Raven for her husband had also carried a letter addressed to her, this one from her mother instead of her brother. Well, they were probably both worded by her mother, but Paxter liked to believe in the illusion that Mace only acted a bumbling fool most of the time to make everyone around him drop their guard against him, and that he was one of the few to understand Mace's supposed cunning, and his intricate letter was a sign that Paxter was trusted like few others by Mama Mace. Is the idiot or the one who sees greatness in one where there isn't the bigger fool? Her mother preferred the term oath, but one was less blind to the failings of one's brother than the ones of a son. Mina could understand that, now that Horrors and Hobber were no longer kicking her ribs but squealing in her arms. Gods, the one slobbered over the majority of her wardrobe and the other's cries were a horror in the night, as he only settled in her arms and not the wet nurses. Still she loved them more than she'd thought possible. They were but 1 year yet and already her mother wanted to wrench her away from them on another errand, this one a lot farther than just to the Uber, but luckily only for a round trip instead of a lifetime. Still Paxter had been reluctant when she told him she would accompany the boats on to Lys and Volantis, and take part of the fleet further still. When she was younger she'd wanted to travel, see the world, but now that it was happening, she only felt dread. A grand tour, circling the free cities. She'd still welcome that, even if she'd rather sit out the coming storm right here at the Uber. A place like Bravos or Volantis might have been a nice retreat as well, but Astapa. Gods forbid, sand and dust and Dothraki and slaves. The greatest slaves in the world. And she was sent to buy them. The part of her that balked at the idea of buying people like chattel, though, was drowned out by Horror's cries and Hobber's baby blue eyes. Before the cargo boats of the Bank of Old Town carrying her family's worth in gold even left their home port did Mina intend to sail for Slavers Bay, so the ink on the contract was dry before her fortunes arrived after. For if the Lannisters got the idea as well, they could surely outbid them, so the only advantage she had was time and a ready fleet. It would have to hold. Olenna's letter had sounded urgent enough. Well, the slaver's leash would have to serve as a rope ladder out of the pit, then, for fear it could turn into a noose. Her mother had been demanding in her education, seeing that her brother was oafish and her sister ditzy. Growing strong. Did you know, Mina, that roses sometimes grow like parasites on other trees, smothering their hosts? Mina could remember those words and the lesson they carried the best. Like it was yesterday she heard her mother's voice delivering her most important sermon. All that was left of House Gardiner died on the field of fire. But then, how come the greatest house of the Reach since time immemorial had been reduced to a line of foolish men, 1 king and 1 heir, thrice widowed, by the time the dragons turned up at their borders? because roses had blooded the green hand and found their blood was not nourishment that could help them grow farther. No, the shadow of wings were the future then. Smart people had been able to see that. A whispered word, and Mern took his whole kin with him. Another, and the dragons knew where to release their flame. And House Tyrell skipped all the steps on the ladder from steward to High Lord. Minor had only sat there, frightened at the knowledge that the greatest loss of the Reach had not been just a massacre. It had been the most successful of all betrayals. But then, a younger Minor had asked her mother, why have we not ensnared the kings since their dragons died? Why have we not sought kingship of our own? Kings, royal houses, they are like the trees that carry the strangling vine. We don't want to be the tree that dies to the rose. And royal houses always die. When it happens, the tree is not simply felled. It is ripped from the earth, root and stem, the wood burned to ashes and the ashes scattered with the wind. Her mother fixed Minor's chin with her hand, and Minor had felt the vines and the thorns herself for the first time. When a king falls, his successor cannot destroy all the vassals of the old regime. It is important we always stay the most important house after the Targaryens, at least until we have consolidated our rule in the Reach to a point that the foxes are either made subservient, eradicated or disgraced to a point no one associates with them anymore. There was a fire in the eyes of Olenna Redwine then, a fire that Minor now knew burned within herself as she listened to Horrors and Hobber and truly understood now. We need the dragons to stay a few more generations, only then we will aid their fall or quell their authority one at a time with the other great houses. Until that day, when House Tyrell can stand unquestioned in the Reach even outside the shade the dragon casts, we will need to prop that foul and rotten tree up with the strength of our vines against all threats from the outside and within. And Minor would do her part in it. Olenna had not given her exact orders, and left her to ensure favorable terms. Well, she already would be a buyer of slaves. Maybe a few foxes, sold before they were caught, could count as credit to the masters of Slavers Bay. It would solve their immediate problem for funds, and their long-standing problems of rivals for Riverrun. When you already would be remembered for trading in slaves, at least do it right. And Minor would see Tyrell rule Highgarden forever. In whose shade was a question for when the dust settled. Not until after Minor would disembark for a longer break from sea at Lies, more than a moon later, did she find out that she yet hadn't lost her sea legs. It was morning sickness. The little one, she'd decided, was just another reason to fight for, as she then accelerated her travel plans going forward. She woke to the echo of the lash, only to find that it had only been a dream. Of course it was a dream, there were no whips around her anymore. She'd banned them the day she'd turned into a person and became an honorable lady. Sticks were banned, too, for after all she knew the value of the commodity of flesh all too personal. And now that she'd suddenly found herself in possession of a great amount of chattel, she'd come to the agreement with her husband that it was a too great a waste to leave marks on trade goods that would lower their value. Even on rebellious ones. Lies had been kind in teaching her that, at least. Or rather, thorough. It was never kind. It was better to use water, that's what she'd learned perfumed garden. A piece of cloth over the head, and then you tilt the bucket over slowly. A drizzle is what you wanted, not drips. Let them think they'd drown. Rescue them. Do not ask questions. Repeat. They did not need to know exactly what they'd done wrong. They'd think of all possible errors they'd committed, and change them. The audience would do all to escape even the thought of such suffering. After all, the slaves were in equal measure thankful and afraid of her. She'd only needed to build a few fountains in her new manse, and they all simply turned obedient. She herself had been born into slavery, her mother sold by her only known kin left alive. Maybe there were still others, somewhere. But seeing that the last of her mother's family had killed her brother, raped her afterwards and then sold her as she carried his daughter to a slaver from Lies, she did not think her mother ever wanted to meet any others. She herself always had known the slaving pit would not hold her down, and already at 25 did she birth her first son, a free woman. A higher prize was waiting for her, one day, for her climb had not ended and she would reclaim all that was taken from her family. Her son would never know chains like her and her little brother. She sometimes felt sorrow for the fate of her brother, but he would have only been an obstacle for her children if she hadn't spoken to that Mirish sorcerer of the boy with the second purest Valyrian bloodline in the world. Of course she hadn't told him she herself possessed the superior line. After the man had served his purpose, she had only needed to shed a single tear and all her brother had left to feel for her was gratitude. He'd only ever know of the revenge she'd taken for him, never of the children she'd denied him to have. The news from across the narrow sea were worrying though, and Igor had sounded scared of the northern warden having deduced his identity. Iloio served her better, for what use was a compromised spymaster? No, Sarah Blackfear would need to order her brother to make bolder moves. Though he was the one that had contacted the old sympathizers under his guise as Varys, they had lost a lot of glory even before Marley's folly. Peake, Osgrey, Costain, Butterwell, they wouldn't be enough. But Igor had whispered he was planning to contact the Hightowers, who were in danger of losing agency in the war to come. Still, even unawares the rulers of Old Town would prove to be uncomfortable bedfellows, ever grasping as they were, but more chaos in the Reach would be her goal for them, not hegemony. Greater promise came from the newest King Sauron in the Stepstones, and the sons of Aliquo Ardaris, looking to regain their hegemony over Tiosh. And, most of all, her student the Black Pearl had helped her contact the Old Mother in the Summer Islands, who now was decidedly more ancient. Tywin was still on the fence. The anonymity she required clashed with the Golden Company's need for securities. A fool, but maybe Iloio should contact them in person claiming his own interests in the battle royal that Westeros was soon to become. Knightly slaves were highly prized, after all. Sarah. The door opened as her husband stepped in. Sarah could prize herself on her looks. She used to be prized for them, after all. However, Iloio was a vision as well. He would have commanded high prices in the perfumed garden with his hair a flaxen veil, his eyes a mixture of coal and obsidian, either glossy or matte depending on the light, and a sculpted body the artists of MYR could not have chiseled finer out of marble. Dear. What brings you to me? Is it news of my kingdom again? In a way, Iloio chuckled as he stroked his shadow of a goatee. He'd tried to grow a proper beard since he stopped being a bravo, the facial hair no longer a liability in combat, now a sign of good breeding. Her man could not grow sideburns for the life of him, though. Her husband drew her gaze to a superbly crafted strongbox, made of weirwood and ebony, inlaid with mother-of-pearl dragons and a locking mechanism of Yeatish make. The dragons were more serpentine in their stylings, their whiskers glimmering golden and with opulent manes of chipped gemstones. Iloio out the box in front of her gently, carefully, almost reverently. I believe, wifey, Iloio started again, that for someone to claim the Iron Throne, certain regalias are required. As far as I know, the Targaryens destroyed their last cache of this up during the reign of the Unlikely. Take them as a sign of my devotion to you. Sarah turned the spiral key and watched the intricate clockworks turn, before the lid lifted itself and revealed to her 3 stony eggs with scaly exterior, one of black and red swirls, another off-white with pale gold spikes that seemed to streak the shell like lightning, and the last a forest green that seemed to reflect an oily bronze sheen when the light hit it just right. The sight stole Sarah's breath for a second. Iloio took the black one into his hands as he looked at her, his hand stretched out towards her. Dragon eggs, found in the Shadowlands north of Ash High. A Yeatish trader purchased them for his collection. The man in question sadly lost his fortune as his main trade route goes through plains that an upstart warlord now lays claim to. This general, a man called Paul Coe, is luckily in need of a lot of capital to finance his warlording. I purchased these from the man practically at a bargain. I hear their original owner died somewhere around Slavers Bay, and we do have greater need of them, don't we? He wore his devilish smile again, and Sarah felt the stirrings of affection for him again. She squashed them, for lovers were fools. Even as she knew he loved her. Would he, if he knew how his first wife truly died? Would she have remained a mere slave if she had not done it? She knew of his promise to her brother, but men were fickle. She knew best, after all. Still, the smile she returned Iloio in the end was not a faked one. She reached out for the egg, and clasped it into her hands. It's warm to the touch. Sarah said it softly. Warm. That cannot be. I found it to be like a stone taken out of a spring, cooler than the air. Iloio looked upon her in confusion, and Sarah did not know what to say. She knew what to think, though, Valyrian ancestry and right and flame and magic. Fire and blood. The egg in her hand turned warmer, then, and as her eyes opened in wonder and wishes, she did not know anymore. Then she felt it hot, scalding, and Iloio next to her retreated a step, the egg in her hand hot to the touch and steaming. No, burning. It was burning her hand, like a branding iron to slave. The egg dropped from her hand, and as it impacted on the marble floor, Sarah thought she heard a shell crack, a lizard hiss and a cackling flame. A flare blazed up, fire licking her feet and burning her, burning her. It was all at once, everything and the pain, and she was in the courtyard, staring at the painful scaly lines imprinted on her palm. Iloio was by her side talking, but nothing stuck to her, it would not even if she listened. They are all gone. She turned at the sheer exasperation in his voice. What? All of them? All three? The other two burned after the first blaze. The eggs. But why? Iloio looked at her almost scared. She knew his thoughts. Of course she did. Magic, big magic had died. Hadn't it? The dragons were gone, and all that was left was addicts in Karth trying to catch leaking power with a sieve. Sarah shuddered at the thought of what the sorcerer would have done to her had she not sacrificed Igor all those years ago. Folly. A folly that claimed more Targaryens than her family ever managed. No. Fire and blood was not her way. Magic was a tool for madmen, the madmen that had ruled her kingdom for too long. War and chaos would suffice, for her. Legitimacy were what you made it, and they had the blood, had the look. Sarah only needed to wait until the waters were muddy enough with blood, and then her son Daemon would take on the name of Aegon VI Targaryen and use the corpses of Elia Martell and her son as the ladder to reach for the Iron Throne. And she would be triumphant. Why did you come here to darken my hall? The man in front of his father did not cower, but then Lord Borrell did not take on a threatening tone, only a tired one. He did have cause for it, though. Their visitor today was especially brazen, after all. My lord, I have come to treat with the Lord of the Sisters on behalf of the Iron Throne. Is it not natural, then, that I come to you? The man's address was not overbearing or deferent towards his father, but Godric could still see the sneer that he tried to hide. Most mainlanders did not bother to even attempt that when they stood under their leaking roof in the Great Hall. Sir, last as I know, I owe allegiance to Lord Sunderland, who rules over all the sisters. I believe his counsel is what you seek. The Knight of Skulls and Kisses showed a smile at the words of the Lord of Sweet Sister, but it was good-natured, like the four of them were friends sharing secrets. Godric, his father, their Maester and Sir Richard Lunmouth. 2 crabs, a rat and a dead man. You could probably make a jape with that premise. Please, Lord Borrell, all know that he who rules Sisterton rules the Bite. Maybe, after the war, the king will grant you the respect you are owed, instead of Lord Sunderland. Your port will be needed in the next few years, and the throne will pay to have it ready for the royal fleet. The king, his father said the word slowly, who is your king, Sir Richard? Heir to Targaryen, the man that cuts himself more frequently on that iron chair than Maegor the Cruel did. Or do you speak for Rhaegar Targaryen, disgraced by his father, who you squired for? There was a short shock that went through Richard Lunmouth at the last sentence. When he answered, his voice almost did not waver. Both. Lord Chelstead, Master of Coin, Lord Varys, Master of Whispers and Lord Connington, advisor to the Crown Prince agree that the sisters' strategic position needs to be secured if the North and the Vale prove rebellious. Is it a certainty, then, that Lord Stark and Lord Arryn harbour treasonous thoughts? The old Maester did look more eager to please this knight in front of them than the lord he was sworn to serve. No, it is not, Lunmouth gifted the rat a tight smile, but it is possible. Lord Stark has left the capital in much confusion when he left, and the lords and ladies are divided in their opinion of him. What is your opinion of Rickard Stark, Sir Richard? His father almost sounded lethargic as he spoke. He is either exceedingly smart or a remarkable fool, Richard Lunmouth said after a second, but whichever proves true, he can call on a large army and the north is difficult to assault. Lord Borrell, all you will be promising are securities for a war that might not yet happen, against an enemy that might not be an enemy. The investment for Breakwater will come regardless, and honors await if the wolves and falcons prove treacherous. There is little chance for you to lose, especially once a part of the royal fleet is stationed here. His father seemed to ponder the decision for a second after his maester spoke before replying. Sir Richard, I require a copy of the contract we will write witnessed by both my maester and my son, and I want the sisters to become their own constituent region under the Iron Throne in case war with the North and the Vale erupts. Returning to the fold of either region would chafe after what they will see as a betrayal. Breakwater will afterwards become the seat of the Lord of Sweet Sister and Overlord of the Sisters. Do your powers extend to promise such change? They do, Lord Borrell. I have a pre-filled contract prepared for you to write your conditions into. I intend to leave with the evening tide after. King's Landing will send funds as soon as I return with the letter. The maester seemed more respectful of his father than Godric had ever seen him, as the four of them put their names to the paper twice. After, Lord Borrell spoke to send the prince's former squire off. Sir Lunmouth. You will leave as unseen as you arrived, I trust. At the once, my lord. I will return with the fleet as soon as I can. The night lamp will guide your way safely. The man nodded towards Godric one last time before pulled his hood up until it obscured his bright smile. As he left the keep, the maester retreated up to his quarters. Godric did probably not quite understand, he had to admit to himself, the significance of the recent talks just yet. Good for him that his father invited him to his private quarters. They stepped through the dilapidated parts of the keep into the cellars carved into the rocks underneath, dry and comfortable under a false bottom of the northern tower. The maester did not know how to reach this place. A comfortable fire bloomed in the hearth as his father turned towards him, his face stern as usual but with a distinct measure of uncertainty. He did not look like this back in the great hall. Here, surrounded by their share of the main trade of the sisters, from furs to golden artworks, his father spoke to him true. My smugglers have noticed Lunmouth the moment he disembarked, Godric. They have also noticed little birds flitting around all of Sisterton today. Godric stopped short as he made to sit on an opulent couch lined with velveteen. The spider. King's Landing did not bother with Sisterton much, the night lamp was lit often enough to deter too much displeasure. Still, the attention was disquieting. Father, that will only increase when the fleet makes Sweet Sister a permanent base. Whoever wins, they'll not leave. Godric had realized that early. He understood the position of the sisters. House Borrell would rise in importance, but the smugglers of Sisterton would dwindle and disappear, and the masters of Breakwater Keep would lose a lot of money. Son, you do not understand. The birds will also see Lunmouth leave, quite happy at that. The night lamp will shine bright tonight, but I need you to make sure that every trusted fake lamp on Little Sister and Long Sister shine their light also, along with a good score here on Sweet Sister. Take the docks beneath our castle to leave, best before the Honourable Knight himself does. The docks of Breakwater. Godric knew them, but they had never been in use to his memory. Hidden from all views, no one would see him leave Sweet Sister. However, the keeper of the night lamp had just promised the throne's emissary that the beacon would be lit tonight. There was more to come, so Godric asked. Father, what do you need of me? Take 3 trusted ships, sink Lunmouth out of sight of the coast tonight. No looting, no survivors. Then you make for White Harbour and get to Lord Stark with our copy of the contract. His father's voice was grave. Godric shivered at his orders. He'd be a traitor, no matter whether the wolves and falcons rose up. He looked at his father, and suddenly saw him an old man. Why, father? We have reached the top of the ladder, as far as it goes here on the Sisters. The fishing and the smuggling keeps us fed better than a fleet and the dragon's gold ever could. Sure, Sunderland has claim over us, but that house of bumbling fools can truly only lay claim to their supremacy in name. You yourself saw who the throne turned to, who they remembered of the sisters once it became necessary. His father almost seemed angry now, and Godric had never seen Grendel Borrell angry before. No, son, either we will remain as we were now that our answer won't reach the king, or the Starks will promise us Sunderland's position for our inaction if they rebel. We will just be disappointed that the royal fleet and the royal gold never makes it here, but who's to know what happens in the seas of the Bight? Godric smiled at that. He left soon after, and that night another few skulls fed the fishes in the Bight, as they had since time immemorial. Afterwards, the heir of Breakwater turned his ship for White Harbour. The morning after Richard Lunmouth died at sea, a raven left Breakwater Castle for the citadel. The old maester had died falling down the wet stairs in the rainy night. The days since they had left the Whispering Woods had mostly left Victorian confused. Since they had left the Whispering Woods. Oh, there'd been plenty of amusement here and there. Still, he was a soldier and all this talk of politics left him only wishing to be out at sea again. The first talks between his father, Rickard Stark and John Arryn had left him decidedly disinterested, but Bolon had been raging for 4 hours after. The man had not even come with them to the wedding that never was, as some had come to call it. Quarian Greyjoy had confined his eldest son to his quarters like a petulant child. Victorian could remember it like it was yesterday. Well, it was yesterday, but the scene had branded itself into Victorian's eyes. He would always remember it like it was yesterday. Or rather, like it would be yesterday when he remembered. No, the day before. Like it would be the day before the day he remembered. Fucking Greenlanders and their fucking flowery language. Victorian knew his problem with words well enough. He knew he was better off silent. He'd probably get along well with the new Stark heir. He was a silent type as well, wasn't he? Ned Stark would understand his struggle with words. Maybe they should bond over a few whores, no better way for hard men like them. He respected the Northerners, they'd seemed more grounded than the other flowery fucks around. How did any house with a trout on their shield ever make Lord Paramount? Victorian was sure only the Reachmen were bigger cunts, flowery, fucks. Yes, flowery fucks. Roses, couldn't get worse than that. Right, hardy Northmen. Rickard Stark had ripped Hoster Tully a new one that day. That was fun. After all, even father had been laughing, and father was smart. He knew what good fun was. But then, Victorian had become a little wary of the Starks, too. I think I like the Starks. Drowned God, had Victorian become wary when Euron muttered those words beside him with a tiny smile. There had been something that Victorian thought was admiration in his eyes, along with the usual hunger. Any person that Euron liked, or could smile with honestly, was someone to be wary of. Still, he had not expected his father's announcement when he had returned from the Stark camp. None of the brothers had. But Euron was silently following like always, even while speaking the opposite to Bolon. That was the advantage of silent types like him, they usually listened better. He wondered what juicy secrets Ned Stark knew of the Eyrie for a second. He was the foster brother of Robert fucking Baratheon after all, the whole Lord of the Eyrie. No, Storm's End. No, Warlord. The whoring warlord of the Eyrie. Storm's End. Or was it whoring warring lord? Whoring warrior lord. Something like that, a man that liked fighting and fucking, just like Victorian. Probably a silent type, too, wordy people were usually flowery fucks. And the man was after all known for his friendship with the Quiet Wolf, whose whole title screamed not a man of fucking flowery words. Bolon had turned very wordy when Victorian had finished telling of yesterday's negotiations with Rickard Stark. Negotiations. That. He'd just been released from his quarters, but then sent back right after his freshest rant, this time without dinner. Should have stayed silent, the idiot. Silent, and smart, like Victorian. After that episode, father had turned decidedly morose. Morose. That. Just sitting there, sighing. Even Euron was silent. That made Victorian wary, though. The only time Victorian was more wary of Euron than when he was silent, was when he wasn't. It was always better to be wary of Euron. The silence stopped after a second. His father did not look morose anymore. No, he was terminated. Determined. That. He was determined as he spoke. Dagmar. Bring my eldest son down again. Take a page out of Rickard Stark's book. If he speaks when he shouldn't, or starts growing loud, slap him. No, punch him. The numbskull won't get it anyway else. I'll be giving him what he wants. Dagmar followed the order silently. He was a good man. A hard man. The man had introduced him to whoring, a good man. Ugly fuck though. Split lip looked like shit. Probably the reason he only went to whores. He came down with Bolon a minute after. His older brother had a red fist print on his face. Imprint. Fist imprint. Probably had given lip to split lip. Hey. Victorian almost had to chuckle, but he stayed silent as his father spoke while his brother scowled at him. Scowled. That. Balon, I am not bringing the old way back. It's beyond foolish when we are adjacent to realms that are stronger, can replenish faster and collectively hate us. However, I am giving you the chance to prove me wrong. I am giving you leave to establish a kingdom of your own in the stepstones built on the old way. Pay for it with the iron price. Show me you can be more than a king of ashes and broken hulls. Quayan sneered at his eldest son, then. Take all the men that will follow you, here from our camp and from all the Iron Islands. But know this. If you take this chance, you will either have to take the Iron Islands from me by the iron price you prize so highly, or you will have to convince my subjects to follow you after I have died because you were able to prove to them the old way is not yet dead. His father looked down on Balon, from where Quayan sat to where Balon stood, and his eyes were the storm and the waves and the deep. After you leave, I will publicly disavow the actions you take as your own, and if on your way to the stepstones you reeve on the Westerlands, the Reach and Dawn, I will hunt you down with the rest of the fleet you couldn't convince to follow you. Have I made myself clear, Balon? His eldest brother laughed then, deep and hollow and booming. Euron smiled. Balon spat at his father's feet, then turned to him to talk haltingly. Haughtily. That. What fleet will you chase me with, when all the captains follow me to take the world by the iron price? Your men cry out for a return to the old way, and you are too old and decrepit to hear it. First I will carve me mine own kingdom, then I will carve myself your kingdom, too. Wait. Did he just? Victorian was pretty sure you did not say it like that. And what was decrepit? Decrepit. His brother turned towards him and Euron. Brothers. Are you with me? Let's make our own kingdom, away from this feeble old man. What say you, Dagmar? Victorian was silent. Euron spoke first. Are you taking your children, Balon? Roderick and Marin? Gods, they are 14 and 13. By that time I had my first salt wife from the Reach, and those two haven't gone on a single reaving. Don't want the girl running around on my ship at 6 and Theon's a toddler. Alanis'll tell right about me, they'll come when they're ready. What's your answer? I'll keep the sea stone chair ready for you, brother. Raise Theon with your wife. I'll take care of him, but you know how it is. Maybe I'll follow you in a few months when father's plan starts to bore me. You know me. There was a sardine smile to Euron's eyes as he spoke that had Victorian wary. Sardonic. That. How would Euron take care of his brother's wife? His eldest brother turned to him expectant, and all Victorian could do was shrug. You know me, Val. I'm a soldier. I follow family. I follow the Lord Reaver of Pike. When you're that, I'll follow you. For now, I'll be staying with father. Balon sneered at that. He could be a fucking cunt. Fucking cunt. Did his brother really say that to him out loud? Fucking cunt. Balon turned to Dagmar then, who outright laughed in his face. I'm a king on my ship, boy. On land, I'll follow the Lord Reaper of Pike. I'm like your brother, I'm a soldier. So I'll stay. Are you going to call me fucking cunt, too? He smiled with his ugly split lip, and Balon didn't call him anything as he strode out. The fucking cunt. Hey. His father's post slackened where he sat. Posture. That. He looked defeated as he addressed Euron and Victorian. Euron. You heard him, consider yourself heir presumptive until Theon comes of age. Your older brother is a fucking idiot. Still, I did not like sending the lackwit to his death. You see that, don't you? Father. You're not going to re-establish the old way like some incompetent imbecile, are you, Euron? You know, Pops, I like reaving. I know why you don't like it, it doesn't work for a whole people. Still, a single reaver has the world open before him. I'll try being a lord for some time, but just as likely I'll just leave someday and never look back. By the storm god, why did you have to be the intelligent one? His father only muttered the words, but Victorian heard them as he was silent. Louder, the Lord Reaper of Pike spoke on. Fuck it, I'll mold Theon into something workable. Worst case I'll make the reader regent. Until then, you'll have to do your own. Balon left the next morning. Out of the delegation of 16 lords that had come with Quayan, none followed him. He took some second sons, a few poached green boys from other crews and the odd lone captain that could not afford a good whore and missed the time he could just steal himself a salt wife. Altogether, Balon could probably man 6 long boats with skeleton crews. That would make for poor reaving, as you had to leave boats behind as soon as a few men died. The whole delegation had come in 39 long boats. Euron smiled when he heard the news. Later in the day, his father took Euron and Victorian along with his main bannerman from 7 islands along to the Stark camp, flying the Golden Kraken on red. The place was busy when the Ironborn arrived, but they had been expected and quickly they were led through to the main tent. Inside the Lord of Winterfell was expecting them, along with his heir and the 2 Arryns. The Lannister soldier that had fought the Blackfish was in attendance, too, as were a bountiful woman of middling age and the most beautiful woman Victorian had ever laid his eyes on. She looked ravishing. That. Some of the lords walked up to Rickard Stark with his father, and Euron joined in with them. Victorian was not really interested in group talks, they were always a primary for what was actually important. Preliminary. That. No, Victorian stepped up to the quiet wolf, and found himself regarded by silent iron eyes. For a minute neither spoke, but Victorian felt himself and saw the man across from him relax. This felt right. Hello. Hello. Victorian. Eddard. Call me Vic. Ned. Drowned God, this man understood him. Want to go whoring? He was met with silence for a second, before Ned spoke again. I am going to be married soon. Oh. Last chance. Eddard Stark gave him a smile, but it did not make Victorian wary. It was kind. Vic, you remind me of my best friend, somehow. Robert. I think you'll like him. He will be arriving in a few days, and in 3 days we are throwing a big feast to celebrate my betrothal. I'll introduce you. Victorian knew it. Robert Baratheon was just like him, a hard silent man that liked fighting and fucking. Ned really got him. It felt like an instant connection. So we'll go whoring the 3 of us, Ned. No, Vic, I am going to be marrying her. I don't want any other. Ned pointed behind him, and as Victorian turned he saw that Ned had pointed at the ravishing woman he'd noticed earlier. The ravishing woman. Wow. He noticed her looking at them with smiling purple eyes, and Victorian noticed he'd raised his right hand and waved to her. She waved back and seemed to be hiding a grin behind the other hand. He looked back to Ned, and he could not stay silent suddenly. Wow. I know. Wow. I know. Saying it once was not enough. You won, friend. You won. Thanks, Vic. They stayed silent after that. Everything that needed to be said between them had been said. Victorian did not exactly know how he felt, but he was somehow some way of content. It was nice. Enough. Victorian heard his father's voice silence the other Ironborn lords. We have been in talks about this for 3 days, and decided to cast our hat in with the Starks more than 2 weeks ago at Nagar's Hill. King Rickard, when can we start sending settlers from Harlaw and Pike to the Stony Shore? In 4 months. I need to call the Ryswells to heal first. I will welcome the first group personally. Then, Quayan Greyjoy, the Lord Reaper of Pike, the Lord of the Iron Islands, said, You have my allegiance, the allegiance of House Greyjoy and the allegiance of all the houses sworn to me in the Iron Island. Drowned God, if this is what it takes to pull my people out of the pit they have fallen back into since the Grey King was swallowed by the waves, I will strap them all to my back and drag them up the ladder you have thrown me. My king. Kneel, Quayan Greyjoy, and say your oath. Rickard Stark spoke the command softly, and yet his voice was more commanding than Victorian's father's when he had not a minute before cowed his lords. Quayan Greyjoy knelt. Behind him, all his lords followed suit, as did Euron and Victorian after a second. To Winterfell I pledge the faith of Pike. Victorian said, his voice a promise in itself. Hearth and heart and harvest I yield up to you, my king. Our swords and spears and arrows are yours to command. Grant mercy to my weak, help to my helpless, and justice to all, and I shall never fail you. I swear it by earth and water. I swear it by bronze and iron. I swear it by ice and fire. Rock King. Rock King. Victorian spoke the echo with all who knelt, and he felt himself tremble as King Rickard Stark answered the ancient pledge of the North and the King smote. He felt himself tremble at something greater. Rise, Quavian Greyjoy, Salt King of the Iron Islands and High Admiral of the Iron Fleet of the Kingdom of Winter. Notes. Woo, second part of the double chapter done. I know, the quote is from the TV series, but I told you I cheated with this one. Also, Once Upon a Time, the HBO series was good. Also, while writing I realized there can never be too many factions in a war. Asterisk cough asterisk in a fictional story asterisk cough asterisk. What I intended to write bloated a lot on paper, so I had to reshuffle some points in the order that I told them, but to keep the chapter roughly equal in length and with the same amount of POVs, things had to change. Conclusion: the big setup will continue for 2 more chapters. The next chapter will only be 1 POV, however, it proved too massive to include within this chapter. It also involves 2 key moments people have already asked for. Robert will enter the stage and we will hear Brandon's confession, #shameless self-promotion. Also, it's already half done. After that there'll be another multi-POV chappy, tying up the pit/ladder sub-arc that is to span these 4 chapters. The next 2 chapters will still take some time, as pesky real life interferes and I have pledged to update Wandering Wolves by the 17th of November, #shameless self-promotion too. Stay tuned, and comment. Retcon notice for Asoyev: there is a deviation from canon in my chapter 9 that I had not noticed while writing, in that I have sadly killed Quavian's latest wife Lady Piper. In Asoyev, the woman dies shortly after the end of Robert's rebellion while giving birth to a stillborn daughter of Quavian. Sadly, my plans for Shella and the Greyjoys make the poor Lady Piper a victim of circumstance. So here, as a small retcon, Lady Piper dies giving birth to Quavian's youngest son Robin. I have only included that retcon notice in this chapter, as earlier it would have spoiled the fact that part of my plans revolved around Quavian's marital status. How does this change the situation on the Iron Islands at this point in time? Little, beyond Quavian Greyjoy's bachelor status. The only other impact we know of that Lady Piper makes, is that the maester she brought with her to Pike was responsible for the death of Aragon Greyjoy during the rebellion due to medical malpractice. However, Robert's rebellion will be greatly altered here. So, Aragon's fate is simply up in the air at this point. Chapter 17, Climb and Fall. Notes. Same title quote as last chapter, and the one before. However, this chapter has a subtitle and in turn a subtitle quote. Subtitle: Out of the Mouth of Drunks. Subtitle quote: Gods he swore softly, out of the mouths of babes. Eddard Stark, A Game of Thrones. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. It was the morning of the day of the betrothal feast, and Robert Baratheon had not yet arrived. Other lords had already announced their presence for the Stark feast, even if the official reason had not been announced yet. They all came. Brackens and Blackwoods and Wents and Freys, Mallisters and Vances and Pipers and all. Alistair Florent had come, as had Baelor Hightower with some lesser Tyrells, Rowans and Oakhurts. The Lannisters had come in force and brought all personage of importance from their entourage. Only the Tullys had been explicitly disinvited. Quavian Greyjoy had come with his lords, though his elder son had apparently decided to take leave of his wits and to carve himself a kingdom out of the stepstones before a war spanning at least one continent adjacent to them was about to break out. That idea was right up there with riding up to a mad tyrant and threatening him to his face while vastly outnumbered, or kidnapping a girl and trying to rape her without making sure whether the very same knights that are supposed to guard you might have moral or obligational objections to such an act. What was it with the firstborn of this generation's highest nobility? Quavian's second son Euron had been sent back to take charge of Pike in his absence, and Lord Roderick Harlaw was to already select the first wave of Ironborn settlers of the north, alleviating the drain on the island's few resources. One of the most unexpected surprises of this trip had been the fast friendship between his son and heir and the third son of the Ironborn Salt King. Victorian was an idiot and had pretty much nothing in common with Ned except that they preferred to stay silent, yet somehow that had been enough, and the two of them had, clicked. Watching them was akin to witnessing something between a mummer's comedy and the dissection of a maester's treatise on the mating habits of grumpkins and snooks. Ricard did not even know anymore. But even Ashura somehow seemed fond of her beloved's new friend. People were weird was the conclusion Ricard arrived at after not getting the matter out of his head for a few hours. Of course, with the big feast in their honor, Ned and his new daughter had taken on some of the creative direction of the feast, aided unofficially by Lady Went and her daughter. It had been Ashura's idea to use his network of the Cregan's men in the surrounding to spread the word that the Northern Lords had convinced some of the guests attending to lend some of the good clothes they had brought in overabundance out to maidens of the small folk that came early enough to be dressed in them. The lords had frowned at Ricard's savage manners but indulged his whims, and the feast drew more small folk than he had ever expected. Scheller even told him that some of the Riverrun staff had called off their work due to sickness that day, only to be seen taking the early trek towards the Stark camp. In one move Ashura had managed to achieve 3 goals that made his work for the evening a lot easier. She'd reinforced the perception of him as an uncouth man unversed in the high culture of the South in the eyes of the majority of the attending nobility. She'd largely increased the scale of the event while raising his standing in the eyes of Riverland's small folk and made it an easy task to seed his spies throughout the event by drawing people unfamiliar with the residents of the immediate surroundings, and she organized for a multitude of people to draw eyes in their unfamiliar costumes away from those that were not meant to be noticed. He'd have never thought of such a move, but he immediately strove to capitalize on the idea. Ned had left the whole planning entirely to his ladylove, and Ricard saw the vivaciousness and vibrancy of Ashura that his son had spoken to him of on full display. The woman was born for politics, like a force of nature, Ricard realized. She'd even convinced Jenna to talk her brother into co-sponsoring the event, and the Bountylicious woman had joined the planning committee the day after she'd brought Stephen free to his camp. It allowed Ricard to throw a truly sumptuous feast with free food and drinks for more small folk than he could ever hope would attend, and that estimation held after riders had gone out the first day to announce the feast, resulting in small folk taking a 3-day trek to attend. His son was supportive every second that Ashura had need of him, but otherwise preferred to retreat with some guards and friends to put more care into the security of his betrothal's announcement. Ricard had to admit that Ned would probably never be a politician, one to beguile or lie his way to his goals when necessary. But in return his son had mastered the blank mask to an astonishing degree, and being known to be too steadfast to play the Game of Thrones dirty had its own advantages. He'd have his wife to cover his blind spots, after all. As his future daughter-in-law rushed all about the place, Ricard already set about to work on setting up leaving the right impressions he'd planned to impress on the nobility behind after tonight. Jonarin had left eastwards to collect the still errant Robert, and Ricard was hopeful the Stormlord hadn't dawdled somewhere on the road. He was glad to be proven right by loud and raucous laughter ringing through the whole camp, so he rose to meet his would-be son-in-law. Ned had told him what to expect. Still, Ricard thought as he saw the giant he hoped to wed to Lyanna, one could probably never be properly prepared for the first time one would ever lay eyes on Robert Baratheon, the man himself. Gods, he looked like the world would shake at his steps and the storms would listen at his bellows. There was a little girl sitting on his shoulders, black of hair and sky blue of eye, squealing in delight, probably around 3 years old. The bastard daughter. Well, this would be an interesting introduction. At just the right time Ned strolled into the clearing of the camp, and another loud guffaw of the giant followed as Robert practically jumped off his horse, that looked to be smaller than he did when he stood beside it. The Lord of Storm's End had not yet acknowledged Ricard's mere existence as he strode over and enveloped his son in a bear hug instead. The girl on his head took the moment to climb over to Ned's shoulder and cling to his head. Gods, the girl moved like a born climber. Did she spend half her life on Robert's shoulders or what? He was glad to see his son return the hug just as fiercely, but saddened all the same to see Ned more relaxed around his foster brother than his blood kin. After the tourney at Harrenhal, Lyanna had told him how Ned was just the kind older brother she'd remembered him as, and she'd reveled at the casual acquaintance they'd formed after years apart. Ricard had not seen much of that Ned. After a little while Ned did extricate himself from the giant and led him over towards Ricard. Gods, where Ned would get by in a court in the future, Robert would be ripped apart by the vultures and vipers circling for prey. The man's emotions chased each other across his face to a ridiculous degree. The joy that had been visible was quickly replaced by recognition as he glanced from Ricard to Ned and back, followed by dread and anxiety and hope and more dread. Not a single political strand of hair in his mane. Ned clapped him on the back without looking, like he knew Robert well enough to understand exactly what was going through his head. The man seemed to take heart in that, as his steps became firmer and he came forward more confidently. He did not smile when he stopped in front of Ricard, but you could tell from his face he smiled a lot. "Lord Ricard, I'm glad to finally meet you in person." Robert's voice did not falter, and it was lacking the overt courtliness of most southern nobles, "and I am happy to meet you alive and well." And he was blunt. No stranger had yet spoken so directly, so without flourish, so without agenda to Ricard since the fire. Ricard saw his son adopt his neutral mask, but his eyes spoke of fondness, exasperation and amusement. "Gods!" he snorted. Ricard snorted. Then he laughed. "Lord Robert, it is a pleasure to meet you as well. My son has told me lots about you. I am happy you two are friends." A smile split Robert's face then, before he released his loud laughter again, joined by Ricard after a second and his giggling daughter. John looked on in fondness, in pride even from the side, and Ricard understood his son when he'd said Robert was an easy man to love. Ashura came onto the scene behind Ned, whose eyes magically seemed to seek her out, and she carried little Rhaenys on her arm. The princess was looking on in jealousy at Robert's daughter having taken over her favorite spot in the world. When Robert saw them, he bounded over without another glance at Ricard, only to perform a flawless, deep bow before Ashura, who returned a full courtly curtsy after smoothly setting Rhaenys down beside her. Ricard would have not thought Robert the man to stand on such courtesies, or even one who could stand them after knowing him for only a second. Everything his own son had told him of the man spoke against that. Then Robert cracked first, a low chuckle escaped him even as he was still standing with perfect posture. Ashura did not join him, but her eyes were laughing louder than before. Robert straightened first as well, before he greeted her. "Hey Ash. Glad to see you're still around." His words were laced with mirth, and teasing instead of biting. Of course they got along, they were his son's best friend and the love of his life. Robert's charm was so much like Brandon's when his son cared, this could have been him. Ashura rose out of her curtsy and Robert gave her a short hug as well, though very respectful and tender, not like with Ned. "Hey Bobby. I saw you brought my favorite mountain goat as well. How'd you convince her mother to let you take Maya?" "Oh, Maya did that all on her own when I told her I could not visit her for some time, as I would be riding after Ned. It had just been 3 days since you left, but already she was missing her other papa too much." Maya needled Doris endlessly, until she was almost happy to agree for me to take her away for nigh on 2 moons. Robert looked on his daughter fondly as he spoke, before whispering loudly to Ashura. "I secretly believe Ned is her favorite person, and all the rest of us are just extras. Napa is my favorite person." Rhaenys stamped her foot beside Ashura, now having learned the name of the dastardly bastard that was laying a claim to Ned. She looked adorable. Robert knelt next to her with another chuckle. Did the man ever not laugh? "Well, hello there little one. I am Robert. What is your name? And how do I call that cute cat on your arm?" Rhaenys smiled then, and the sun rose again. "I am Rhaenys. And this Balerion. But all call me little son. And this Balerion." "Nice to meet you, little son," the perpetually smiling giant said. "Do you maybe want to ride on my shoulders? I am taller than Ned, after all." The princess pondered this for a second. She looked up at Robert, over to Ned, and back to Robert again, before finally speaking. "No, I want Napa. As my princess commands," Robert said, before turning over to Ned to shout, "Pass." Ricard could not believe what he was seeing next. Maybe it was the little girl on Ned's head, that suddenly started screaming in absolute delight at her father's word. Maybe it was Ned compliance to the request without question, his neutral facade unchanging throughout. Maybe it was Robert's exuberant laughter while madness was happening in front of him. Probably it was because he realized in that moment that Robert Baratheon was batshit crazy and his son must have caught it as well. "Iflyyyyyyyy." Maya Stone yelled up to the heavens as Ned calmly took her off his shoulders and threw her towards Robert in a high arc with practiced precision. The large Storm Lord caught her with an ease just as practiced before kissing a slobbery kiss to her forehead, and father and daughter called out the finish together. Like a falcon, as high as honor. To the side, John simply stood in resignation. For him it was obviously not the first time to hear his house words misused in this exact fashion. Albert beside him simply stared on in shock. Robert and his daughter simply cuddled a second longer before he deposited the little climber back on his shoulder. At least Ned, his son, at last seemed to remember who he stood amongst, and for once in a while Ricard saw his son's mask crack. His boy turned red. He turned red. Ricard did not know how to react. This was the man slated to become his son-in-law. Gods, Ned had not exaggerated when he told of Robert's eccentricity, even understated it, as well as his ability to make friends. As undignified as his actions had been, all men at camp looked at the man like they wanted him as their new best friend. He drew people. He'd never draw the true players, though, and that scared Robert, because they would be the danger to his daughter when she moved south. Ricard would have thought more on it in that moment, but he found himself interrupted. "I want to fly, too. Like a dragon?" Rhaenys asked. And Rhaenys got what she wanted. Without a second thought, the Lord Paramount of the Stormlands picked up his little cousin thrice removed and threw her in the direction of his foster brother, who looked decidedly more panicked, now that a princess-shaped projectile was flying towards him. As he caught her with trembling hands, Ricard only felt himself release a breath he did not know he'd held, collectively with the majority of the people in attendance. The Lord of Winterfell looked around him, still not grasping what had just occurred. His son shakily put the little princess up on his shoulders, where she gleefully took her rightful seat and gripped onto her reins in Ned's hair. Robert did not stop laughing throughout, and while the same laughter seemed to spread throughout all the guards looking on with the Baratheon as its center, at least the Storm Lord would not laugh for long anymore. Because behind him, Ricard spied Ashura stalking up to him with a scowl on her face that woke the fear of the old gods in Ricard's bones. After exchanging a short glance with John, they both decided simultaneously to slink away from the action. Gods, he needed a drink. He still had the feast coming up later, after all. Loud laughter followed them as the two founders of the Northern Alliance sought out the commander's tent, and it rang throughout all the preparation. Ricard heard it as the small folk arrived in droves, and Robert Baratheon started wrestling all the lowborn in the yard, and as the little children started swarming him after he beat their parents, tearing the giant down. He heard it as the lords and ladies arrived, and Robert Baratheon welcomed friends old and new from all corners of Westeros. He heard it as the food was brought to the great tables, in the evening when the wine started flowing and he was about to start the feast officially. He had been right. The man never stopped laughing. In fact, Ricard believed Ned had to kick Robert's shin to shut him up as the Lord of Winterfell raised his wine to toast to all in attendance. Ricard sat at the central table with his sons and Ashura and the Arryns. The Riverlords were seated spread out around them, and Ricard did not seem to care for their feuds in the arrangements. The Westerlords had their own seats, as did the Ironborn and the Reachmen. Spreading out into all directions were a multitude of guardsmen and small folk, mingling amongst each other with no boundaries between factions. As Ricard had ordered the barrels open 3 hours earlier, the mood was already merry. The Lord of Winterfell stood, his usually immaculate beard slightly disheveled, though not as bad as he made himself look in Riverrun. A grey and white doublet cloaked both him and his sons, good quality but unadorned. Almost austere, in appearance. Ashura beside Ned wore cloth of silver grey, purple and white, and both of them seemed to glow. Both John and Albert wore cloth of intricate religious motif, blue and white as their sigil. Robert Baratheon, next to Ned, did not wear his house colors, merely a comfortable and fine cloth of green and brown. "Friends," Ricard said loudly, as all around him grew quiet, "I am beyond glad that all of you have come to attend. When I came to the Riverlands, it was in expectation of taking home a bride for my eldest son. For my heir, when I originally came down from the north. I stand to return home, not with a bride for my eldest son, but still with a bride for my heir. I raise this glass to welcome you, Ashura, as a daughter of our pack of wolves. My Ned and you make each other happy, and I could not ask for more. Welcome, Ashura Dane, soon to be Ashura Stark." There was a short polite lull after the announcement, as the nobility raised their own goblets to drink. Just as everyone's wine was at their lips, someone broke the silence. "Bugger me, by the old gods. Pay up, you bastards, I was right." A bout of laughter followed from one of the guard tables closest to the nobility, a group of 5 Northmen in their midst. Garth Hightower, sitting beside his brother Baylor, spit out the wine in his mouth as he choked out a hacked cough mixed with stifled laughter. A laughter that only spread through the tables, taken up by the Northman first along with Robert Baratheon, as Ricard's face turned stony. Quiet followed the amusement, as Ricard stalked over to the table that started it all, looking at his offending guard. "Harwen." Ricard directly addressed the man that started it all, a man seemingly a little into his cups. "What were you right with, my good guard? Do tell what moved you to interrupt my announcement in such a way, please." The not smile Ricard wore seemed to frighten a few men around. Harwen the guard certainly looked decidedly more sober suddenly as he rose. "Lord Stark. That is to say." "Well." Harwen stopped, fidgeted on his spot for a second and almost seemed to stammer before he spoke up. "There was a betting pool, you see, Lord Stark. We weren't sure what the feast was for. But, you see Lord, us 5, that's me and Harold and Rod and Owen and Bob, we each had our own answers. We bet a silver moon each on our own, so now I get 4 moons from the others. I bet the feast was to make Lady Stark into, well, Lady Stark. All official and like, Lord." Ricard showed a controlled cracked smile in his faked. Harwen was doing good. "Oh. Do tell, what were the other options? Harold. All of you. What did you think we were celebrating?" The man beside Harwen rose next to him, slightly more drunk it seemed, as he almost shouted his bid for the 5 moons. "To celebrate Lady Lyanna's safe return home." Owen and Bob stood up next, each yelling their reasons loud enough for all to hear. "To celebrate our return home, old gods, me wife is waiting damn it. To stick it to the damn trouts." The last line Bob screamed loud enough to leave an echo in the night, just before laughter erupted throughout the tables again. It took a little time to settle this time, as Ricard bellowed along and many a guest joined in mirth. "Roderick." Ricard addressed the last guard remaining. "What did you bet on, my man?" "You know, Lord Stark. I just thought after all this mess the last month, Lord, you just wanted to throw a party, you know. For parties sake. For yourself and us." Ricard laughed again, harsh and loud and free like the wind on the northern plains. "All of you," he said as in the end, "all of you 5 make good points. Why not should we celebrate for all of that? For parties sake, for the return of my beloved daughter Lyanna, for my new daughter Ashura, for all our return, and to stick it to the fucking trouts." At the last bit, his accent came through, and the Northman laughed his cold harsh laugh with him. Robert Baratheon guffawed along. "Men," Ricard Stark addressed the 5 guards before him, "all of you won your bet. Let me pay each of you a dragon, as should be a proper price for loyal men like you. Go out and seek yourself a wife, Owen's the only one that has one to return to after all." And his guards toasted him for all the lords to hear, a rough lord from a rough land that did not care about their southern finesse and games. Now, Harwen and Harold and Owen and Roderick and Bob all could start to drink in truth. Ricard Stark returned to his table amidst the laughter of all, loudest among them Robert Baratheon, Walder Free and, a sight that warmed Ricard's heart, his son Brandon. The boy laughed unrestrained like he had not in days. A little it pained Ricard though, as he knew he would not hear the laughter long tonight. Brandon had his part to play tonight, and it would hurt his son yet help his family. The people were happy, the people mingled, the people drank. Brandon smiled at a woman of the small folk dressed in finery, who returned the same with a blush. A buxom woman approached Robert, Ricard saw, and he could not help overhear. "Hello, handsome," the woman cooed, almost pressing her impressive teats out of her low neckline and into the stag lord's face as she looked at him with proper doe eyes. "What's your name, hun?" Robert struggled. Ricard saw Robert struggle, only to tear his eyes away from the wench's teats and look into her face. "Sweetie," he started, but the woman interrupted him huskily. "Not sweetie, hun. I'm Bessie." "Bessie. Girl. Thanks. But, I am kind of taken. In fact, see the man over there that scared all the gruff guards of the north. Robert turned to Ricard, and their eyes met. After, Ricard's eyes met Bess's, and while panic sat in for the young lass, Robert seemed almost amused as he spoke on. He's going to be my father-in-law. Do you think it wise if we offended him? Ricard laughed internally at the cheek, though he showed the same cold smile he had earlier. As Bessie tried to stammer out an apology and leave, he beckoned the girl over. The slap Robert gave her behind as she walked away from him seemed more good-natured and teasing than depraved, though, and Ricard shot him a wink as Bessie's eyes seemed glued to the floor. Young lady, Ricard addressed the woman of the small